My husband Bob and I are in our second year of marriage. While I may not excel in many areas, cooking is my forte. Your cooking is really delicious, Bob once said. That compliment, given on the lunch I prepared for our first date, was what made me fall for him. After 6 months of dating, we got married, and I left my job to become a full-time housewife. About a year ago, my father-in-law passed away, leaving just my mother-in-law, Bob, and me living together. I had hoped we could experience some time alone as newlyweds, even briefly, but when Bob said, "Mom's been feeling vulnerable since Dad passed away," I couldn't refuse. Shortly after starting our married life, I realized my mother-in-law didn't like me. I had encountered bullies at my old job, but she was worse. She constantly found fault with everything I did. While I was cleaning, she would point out every tiny spot I missed and say, "What's this brown spot? Can't you see it?" Once, she forced me to try to remove an unremovable stain from the floor, making me scrub it repeatedly. I wasn't allowed to stop until Bob came home from work. She would wake me up in the middle of the night and demand, "We're almost out of plastic wrap. Go and buy some now. Otherwise, I won't be able to sleep just thinking about it." Since the grocery store was closed, I had to run to the nearest convenience store. If I tried to wake Bob, she would explode in anger, saying, "How dare you wake your tired husband? House chores are the wife's job." To avoid her wrath, I had no choice but to obey. These midnight errands were physically exhausting, but having my belongings thrown away or hidden was even more mentally draining. "I don't know where your stuff is. Maybe you left it somewhere," she would say whenever I couldn't find my things. It's awful to blame others for your own mistakes. I can never forget how shocked I was when I found my favorite cardigan in the trash can a few days later. When I told Bob what happened, he just sighed heavily. "Well, you can just buy a new one," he said. I also tried in vain to persuade him to talk to her. Not knowing what else to do, I bought a safe with the money I'd saved before marrying Bob. I kept my belongings out of her sight, especially my valuables, which I stored in the safe. It's crazy to distrust your own family like you do. I'd like to see the face of the person who raised you. Her harsh tone intensified, and every time she opened her mouth, I had to brace myself for the inevitable verbal attack. She criticized every meal I cooked, saying, "Too bland," or "No taste at all." When I tried to make the dishes more flavorful, she complained they were too spicy. I began to doubt my cooking skills and couldn't help asking my husband for his opinion on the taste. "Mom has very strong food preferences. I think it's delicious," he said. Cooking, once a joy, became a chore. After a year of enduring my mother-in-law's bullying, I had an epiphany. Staying home all the time was the problem. Realizing this, I decided to start working part-time. I had quit my job to be a housewife as Bob requested when we got married, but if staying at home was this painful, I wouldn't have left it so easily. Despite a slight gap in my career, I was valued for my quick learning skills at my part-time job, and it simply felt good to be praised again. However, as I spent less time at home, my mother-in-law began to focus her harassment during breakfast and dinner times. She used to eat despite her complaints, but started leaving most of the food untouched, barely taking a bite before leaving the table. I lost count of the times she accidentally knocked over her soup bowl. When I swallowed my pride and asked her what was wrong with the meal, she'd laugh and say, "You think asking will solve everything, don't you? Why don't you try thinking for yourself?" I was left alone to clean up her leftovers at the dinner table. One day, my mother-in-law really crossed the line. While we were having dinner, she suddenly stood up, took her plate in her hand, and headed to the kitchen. As I looked up in surprise, our eyes met, and she smirked. "What?" By the time I realized what was happening, she had already thrown the meal I made into the trash can. "This is such an awful-looking meal. Even dog food would look better than this," she scoffed. I looked at Bob in disbelief, but he just ignored me and continued eating. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, so I rushed to the trash can. I opened its lid and stared at the ruined food. "This is terrible." I turned around to see Bob, but he wouldn't even look at me. She probably wasn't feeling well. He dismissed his mother's actions. How could she throw the food away right in front of the person who made it? I asked, growing more upset. Bob scratched his head in annoyance and said, "Look, I have work tomorrow. Unlike you with your part-time job, I'm a full-time employee working hard from morning to night. What's wrong with doing a part-time job? I work, cook at home, and then have my cooking thrown away by your mother." My voice broke with emotion, and he sighed deeply. "Lisa, you're becoming a nag. Mom's probably irritated by your nagging too. you know. And if it's that bad, then you shouldn't be cooking anymore. After saying that, Bob walked into his bedroom, leaving me staring at his back in disbelief. At that moment, I finally realized he didn't care about me at all. Something inside of me just snapped. The next day, I prepared breakfast as usual and let both Bob and my mother-in-law know it was ready. Bob sat down to eat, but my mother-in-law grabbed her plate and said, "Not even a dog would eat this in the morning," then threw her breakfast in the trash can. Without a word, I stood up and took away the breakfast I prepared for Bob. "What?" he said, looking bewildered. "I will have it." I quickly sat down and started eating his breakfast, ignoring my mother-in-law's actions and Bob's growing frustration. "Hey, why are you eating my breakfast? What are you doing?" they both exclaimed. I looked at them innocently and replied, "Well, since your mother said a dog wouldn't even eat this, you shouldn't be eating it either. I'll take responsibility for what I made and eat it myself." "No, I didn't say that. But you didn't deny what your mother said, did you?" Bob opened his mouth but seemed unable to find anything to say. "Lisa, stop talking nonsense and make Bob's breakfast," my mother-in-law snapped. I looked straight at her with a smile. "I'm very sorry that I have been serving you the sort of food that a dog wouldn't even eat. Don't worry, I won't cook for you ever again." I grabbed my knife and fork, finished eating breakfast, and stood up. Bob said, "Wait, Lisa, what about my breakfast?" "Eat whatever you like," I replied, then left the house quickly. I usually return home around 5 p.m., but that day I had a few errands to run after work, so by the time I got home it was already past 8 p.m. "Oh, you're very late. We've been waiting for you. Really, where on earth have you been?" Bob and my mother-in-law complained, looking very hungry. "Oh, haven't you two eaten yet? I already had my dinner." My mother-in-law's face turned red with surprise and anger. "How dare you eat alone?" "Well, I did say I wouldn't cook for you anymore. Or were you looking forward to my terrible cooking?" "How dare you talk back to me like that?" she shouted, slamming the table in frustration. But then she quickly regained her composure and came up with what she thought was a brilliant idea. "If you're not cooking, then return the food money. Bob has been paying for all the living expenses, so you should pay him back every penny you spend on your food." I couldn't help but laugh at her confident declaration. "What's so funny?" she demanded. "Since I started working part-time, I've been paying not just for food but all living expenses." It was Bob's suggestion. I turned to him. "Mom isn't happy about your working, but if you pay the living expenses, it might calm her down," he had said to me. It had been over a year since I started my part-time job, which means I had been covering the living expenses for the last half of our married life. My mother-in-law, apparently unaware of this, looked shocked and turned to Bob. "Is that true, Bob?" "Well, you wanted more pocket money," Bob mumbled weakly, making excuses. He had me cover the living expenses so he could use the extra money for his mother's allowance. "You seem to have been spending quite a lot on extravagant meals." In the mailbox, I found a flyer for regular customers at an upscale restaurant. I had thought my mother-in-law made her own lunch, but after seeing the flyer, I had my suspicions and found some receipts from that restaurant in the trash. Shouldn't the proper thing be to pay back all the living expenses I've provided? After all, it was my hard-earned money. "Don't worry, I'll be sure to bill you properly," I said with a bright smile to my mother-in-law, who was trembling with anger. "Hey, what do you mean by billing?" Bob, perhaps sensing something, turned pale and stood up. "I want a divorce, and of course, I'll make sure I ask for alimony." "Divorce?" he muttered in shock, but then brightened up, thinking he found a flaw in my plan. "Do you think you can afford to live on your own with what you earn from your part-time job?" He probably thought I would struggle financially. "About that part-time job, I've been offered a full-time position." "What?" "I've also decided where I'll live." My actual plan was to commute from my parents' home for a while, I said, watching the realization dawn on him. "I'll get my lawyer to handle the proceedings from now on." With those words, I went to my bedroom and grabbed the luggage I had packed the night before. Bob, still in shock, stood frozen by the dining table. I ignored him and walked past. "Lisa, I'm sorry," he called out, making me stop and turn around. "Sorry for what? What do you mean?" I asked, exasperated. "It was hard to take sides between you and Mom." "I never said anything bad about your cooking, did I?" he replied. He doesn't understand anything at all. In the end, I truly realized I had been blind. It's not about taking sides. You chose to say nothing when the food was being thrown away and when I was being harassed by your mother over and over. Despite my pleas, you never helped me. Your playing the victim doesn't change the fact that you hurt me. I reproved him. Bob started crying bitterly. Seeing the gravity of his sorrow, I quickly glanced at the pathetic man and headed toward the front door. As I reached for the door, my mother-in-law called out to stop me. I never intended for things to get this bad. I was amazed at how oblivious she was to the severity of her actions. I've looked after you all this time, and it's disappointing that the last thing I hear from you is such an excuse-like response. From now on, you won't have to worry about being caught for spending a lot of money on delicious meals. My mother-in-law stood frozen, her eyes wide open as if her breath had stopped. I returned to my parents' house, where they warmly welcomed me, already aware of my situation. According to my lawyer, everyone in the neighborhood knew my mother-in-law was incapable of household chores. Apparently, my father-in-law had managed the housework when he was still alive. After his passing, Bob, now my ex-husband, and his mother lived on takeout and eating out. To them, I was a convenient housekeeper to exploit. The news about our divorce quickly spread throughout the town. Eventually, it reached Bob's bosses and colleagues, causing him considerable embarrassment. Bob and his mother are now in financial trouble, having hardly saved any money and squandering it all. They are panicking over the alimony they owe me. Now that everybody knows about their mistreatment of me, finding a new housekeeper has become impossible. They can't even afford the kind of meals they used to have. Bob, unrelenting, kept texting and asking if we could get back together. I also received messages from my mother-in-law filled with excuses, but they were repetitive and uninteresting, so I stopped reading them. Now, I enjoy cooking for my family, making sweets and baking cakes on weekends. I often share my creations with my colleagues. Surrounded by those who appreciate my cooking, I believe this will help restore my confidence. With this new hope, my heart swells with anticipation.
I apologize for any inconvenience, but I'm not feeling well today. Could I possibly take a short rest? It's quite unfortunate that I'm under the weather, especially since I am working remotely and have a virtual meeting scheduled. Despite having to make such a request, which feels a bit embarrassing, I appreciate your understanding, considering my pregnancy. It's kind of you to offer a break. Let's pause for 45 minutes and reconvene afterward. I'm genuinely thankful for your empathy and flexibility. Normally, such a break might not be allowed, but given the circumstances, I've decided to accept your kind offer and rest. Laying down for a bit should help me recover and return to work feeling refreshed. I've set my alarm for a half-hour nap, hoping it will do the trick. However, just as I was about to drift off, my mother-in-law unexpectedly entered my room, visibly upset. She accused me of neglecting my duties around the house in favor of spending time on my computer. Despite my attempts to explain that I was actually working and merely taking a necessary break due to my severe morning sickness, she didn't seem to believe me. Her reaction was harsh, criticizing me for what she perceived as laziness. In her anger, she misunderstood my situation entirely, even resorting to physical aggression, which was both shocking and dangerous, especially considering my pregnancy. Despite my pleas, she continued misunderstanding my attempts to explain as backtalk. This confrontation escalated to a point where I felt my safety and that of my unborn child was at risk. Regrettably, I had to cancel the meeting abruptly to address this urgent situation. Just then, a concerned voice from my computer inquired about the commotion, which momentarily caught my mother-in-law off guard. Her anger shifted to surprise. To give a bit of background about myself, my name is Sophia, and I'm 30 years old. After completing my education in a vocational school, I embarked on a career in it. Despite my qualifications, I found the job challenging and often doubted my abilities, feeling overwhelmed and considering leaving my position. However, around 4 years into my role, just as I was about to discuss my resignation due to the toll it was taking on me both physically and mentally, my boss proposed a different path. He recognized my contributions and offered me the opportunity to lead a new project, acknowledging my hard work and potential. This was a pivotal moment in my career. Feeling uncertain, I shared my doubts with my boss, confessing that taking on a new project seemed daunting, especially since I was on the verge of resigning. I couldn't imagine anyone entrusting me with such a significant responsibility given my hesitations. To my surprise, my boss reassured me, stating that it's natural not to be able to tackle everything solo and that teamwork was the key to success. He mentioned he had already found a collaborator for me and excused himself to fetch my new partner. The wait filled me with curiosity and a bit of anxiety about who my boss would bring. About 22 minutes later, he returned, introducing me to Jerry, my project partner. Jerry greeted me with a friendly smile, and I was immediately struck by his warm presence and good looks. As we got acquainted, I learned that Jerry, despite being from a different department, had an excellent reputation and was well regarded by both his peers and juniors. Our boss tasked us with making the project a success and left us to decide our approach. Alone with Jerry, I felt a mix of excitement and nerves, expressing my hope that I wouldn't hinder our progress. Jerry, ever the optimist, assured me we'd support each other and succeed together. Working with Jerry was a breath of fresh air. He excelled in interactions with clients, handling sales and presentations, while I focused on the technical aspects, developing systems as needed. Our collaboration not only pushed the project forward, but also brought us closer personally. We began spending time together outside of work, enjoying each other's company in a more relaxed setting, which naturally evolved into a romantic relationship 2 months later. We successfully completed the project, earning acclaim within the company, which reinforced my belief in my professional abilities and the value of perseverance. 2 years into our relationship, Jerry proposed, expressing his desire for my support in all aspects of life. Despite my limited experience in relationships, I was touched by his commitment, and feeling more content than ever, I happily accepted his proposal. Eager to share our happiness, we visited Jerry's family home to introduce ourselves. Upon arrival, Jerry's father welcomed us warmly, complimenting my appearance and inviting us in with open arms. His kindness made me optimistic about meeting my mother-in-law, hoping she would be just as welcoming. As we made our way to the living room, I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and nerves about the new chapter in my life. Upon meeting my mother-in-law for the first time, I introduced myself with enthusiasm and respect, hoping for a warm reception. However, she seemed to dismiss my presence, focusing on the television instead of acknowledging me. It was Jerry who pointed out my attempt to greet her, prompting her to finally acknowledge us, albeit with a clear preference for her son over me. Jerry suggested overlooking his mother's cold reception and invited me to join them on the sofa, aiming to ease into a more formal introduction and discussion about our relationship. When the topic of our marriage came to light, his mother's reaction was far from supportive. She openly expressed her disapproval of me as Jerry's partner, attributing her stance to our differing backgrounds and implying that our values would be incompatible due to our disparate financial upbringings. Her words were a blunt dismissal of the possibility of our union, suggesting that my humble beginnings and Jerry's affluent lifestyle would prevent me from fitting into their family. Despite the shock and hurt her judgment caused, I struggled to formulate a response, feeling overwhelmed by the situation. Jerry and his father immediately came to my defense, challenging the notion that our differing backgrounds could dictate the success of our relationship. Jerry's objection to his mother's harsh words showed his commitment to us, and his father attempted to mediate the tension. Yet, my mother-in-law remained unconvinced, setting forth a condition that caught us all off guard. She demanded that if we were to marry, I must agree to live with them in their family home. This unexpected ultimatum was her way of granting her approval for our marriage, placing me in a difficult position. The thought of not starting our married life independently as I had hoped was disheartening. However, understanding the importance of family and the commitments that come with marriage, I agreed to her terms. I assured her of my readiness to embrace all responsibilities, including caring for her and my father-in-law when needed. My declaration surprised everyone, especially Jerry and his father, who likely did not anticipate my willingness to comply with such a significant request. I made it clear that my commitment to Jerry extended beyond our immediate happiness to include the well-being of his family. With a heavy heart yet determined resolve, I asked for her approval once more, hoping this gesture would bridge the gap between us and allow us to move forward as a family. Agreeing to my mother-in-law's condition, I found myself securing her approval for our marriage. She asked me to look after them, which I promised to do, marking the end of our initial tense introduction. Despite my reservations about living with my in-laws, the presence of Jerry and the support of my father-in-law gave me hope that things might turn out fine. Fast forward 8 months, Jerry and I were married, and I moved into his parents' house as agreed. The first few months passed with little incident. My mother-in-law remained mostly silent, perhaps taking the time to observe my integration into their household. Aware of her watchful eyes, I diligently managed household chores alongside my full-time job, hoping to avoid any cause for complaint. One morning, as I was about to leave for work, my mother-in-law stopped me, indicating she wanted to have a discussion. Anticipating a lengthy conversation, I braced myself for what lay ahead. I promptly informed my boss that I would be late as my mother-in-law chose to discuss my pregnancy, a topic not surprising given Jerry and I had been planning for our family's future. I was prepared for her thoughts, expecting her to suggest I quit my job to focus on the pregnancy and eventual motherhood. Indeed, she voiced exactly that opinion, arguing that I should leave my job immediately. This stance was difficult for me to accept. Before marrying Jerry, quitting might have seemed like a plausible option. However, my work had become a significant part of my identity and happiness. Moreover, with a baby on the way, the financial stability my job provided felt more crucial than ever. Despite my reasoning, my mother-in-law persisted, criticizing my decision to work and even my ability to manage household tasks. Her harsh words began to take a toll on my well-being. The conversation stretched on, and as time ticked away, I realized I was significantly late for work. Feeling cornered, I acknowledged her demand to quit my job, though I had no real intention of doing so. This concession was meant to end the immediate confrontation, but my mother-in-law pushed further, insisting I inform my employer of my resignation that very day. This left me in a difficult position, outwardly agreeing while internally conflicted about my next steps. After arriving at work significantly late, I couldn't shake off the unease clouding my thoughts. Seated at my desk, I found myself voicing my worries under my breath, catching the attention of my boss, who could tell something was amiss. Despite my attempts to dismiss his concerns, he saw through my facade and guided me to a secluded conference room for a private discussion. Reluctantly, I opened up about the dilemma I was facing at home. My mother-in-law had sternly advised me to quit my job due to my pregnancy, insisting that it was for the best. Yet the thought of leaving my job felt wrong to me. I wished to continue working, I told my boss. He listened intently, absorbing the complexity of my situation before falling into a contemplative silence. It wasn't long before a solution sparked in his mind. He proposed the idea of remote work, suggesting that it could be a viable compromise. Working from home would shield me from my mother-in-law's scrutiny and allow me to continue my professional duties without the physical strain of commuting. The idea resonated with me as a potential win-win solution. Acting swiftly, my boss headed straight to the relevant department to get the green light for me to work remotely. From my desk, I watched anxiously for any sign of approval. Soon enough, a positive gesture from my boss confirmed that I would be transitioning to working from home. Grateful for his support, I prepared for this new chapter, hopeful that it would alleviate the tensions at home. I stayed later at the office to organize and hand over necessary documents to my colleagues, announcing that I would be working remotely starting the next day. When I arrived home that evening, I was met with a stern-faced mother-in-law who seemed prepared for a confrontation. She questioned me about quitting my job, to which I explained my new arrangement of working from home. Her response was less intense than I anticipated, allowing me to sigh in relief, albeit temporarily. I was thankful for my employer's flexibility, but little did I know this change would soon introduce a new set of challenges. The very next day, my mother-in-law's attempts to assert her presence in my new work environment began with an early wake-up call that was far from necessary. Her loud demands disrupted my sleep at 6:05 a.m., a stark reminder of the delicate balance I would need to maintain between my work responsibilities and my new living situation. As I tried to ignore her and catch a few more moments of rest, I realized that navigating this new arrangement would require patience and resilience. Despite my best efforts to ignore her persistent calls, my mother-in-law's voice eventually became so loud that it risked waking my husband. Wanting to avoid causing him any inconvenience, reluctantly, I left the warmth of my bed and headed to the living room to address her demands. "What's going on? It's only 6 o'clock in the morning?" I questioned, only to be met with her insistence that it was already time to start the day and prepare breakfast, a task she deemed overdue by her standards. Her logic seemed flawed to me. Breakfast was usually a later morning activity in our household. Yet, according to her, she had been patient with me up until this point, allowing me to sleep because I had to go to work. But now, with me working from home, she expected me to rise early every day for breakfast duties. Despite my internal objections, I found myself in the kitchen, starting the day far earlier than necessary, preparing breakfast under her watchful eye. After announcing that breakfast was ready, my mother-in-law criticized both the timeliness and quality of the meal, particularly targeting the soup for being too salty. Defending my cooking, I tried to explain that I have followed the usual recipe, but her mind seemed made up, using this as a pretext to offer me a lesson in housekeeping. A proposal I accepted with a heavy heart, hoping to keep the peace. Her lessons soon proved to be a series of exhaustive demands that extended well beyond the kitchen. Once my husband and father-in-law departed for work, I had hoped to start my remote work. However, my mother-in-law had other plans, insisting on a thorough completion of household chores before I could even think about sitting down at my computer. Her understanding of work was fundamentally different from mine, equating value only with physical labor and dismissing the legitimacy of remote work as inconsequential. Feeling cornered, I complied with her instructions, putting aside my professional responsibilities to tackle the cleaning and laundry. Despite her continuous dissatisfaction with my efforts, she demanded a level of cleanliness that she herself did not adhere to, critiquing my use of the vacuum and insisting on more traditional methods of cleaning, which consumed even more of my time. After hours of household chores, I finally returned to my desk, eager to catch up on my work. Yet the reprieve was short-lived. My mother-in-law's voice soon echoed once again, summoning me from my work with an urgency that left me wondering what possible task awaited me this time. The cycle of interruptions made it clear that balancing my remote work with her expectations was going to be an ongoing challenge, requiring patience, tact, and perhaps a new strategy. My attempts to balance work with my mother-in-law's demands reached a boiling point when she interrupted me once again, asking for tea while I was deeply engrossed in my work. Frustrated and unable to contain my feelings any longer, I asked if she could possibly make it herself. Given that I was in the middle of something important, this honest expression of my boundaries was met with an exaggeratedly negative response from her, accusing me of being disrespectful and lazy, mistaking my work on the computer for leisure. The situation escalated quickly when, in a burst of anger, she physically grabbed my shirt. Although she didn't go as far as to hit me, the threat of violence hung heavily in the air. I managed to defuse the situation with an apology, but this incident marked a turning point. From then on, my mother-in-law seemed to assert her dominance more aggressively, summoning me for increasingly petty tasks and treating me more like a servant than a family member. Despite pleading with my husband and father-in-law to intervene, their presence did little to curb her behavior, as she cleverly concealed her true nature around them. Months of enduring this treatment left me both physically and emotionally drained. However, a particularly distressing incident occurred on a day when I had diligently completed all my chores early in anticipation of an important online meeting, just as the meeting was about to start. Feeling suddenly unwell, I had to request a short break during the meeting, which was kindly granted by the meeting leader. As I lay down to rest, my room door flew open, and my mother-in-law stormed in, accusing me of shirking my duties under the guise of work. Despite my attempts to explain that I was genuinely unwell and had already completed the household tasks, she launched into a tirade, questioning the legitimacy of my work and accusing me of lying. Her anger escalated to a shocking act of violence as she began to physically assault me, endangering not just my well-being but also that of my unborn child. In a desperate attempt to protect myself and my baby, I had no choice but to cancel the meeting and seek safety. In this moment of crisis, a voice from my computer offered a brief distraction, but it did little to deter my mother-in-law's fury. Her actions, driven by misunderstanding and a refusal to acknowledge the legitimacy of my work and health needs, underscored the severity of the situation, leaving me in a position where I had to reevaluate my living situation and seek a resolution to ensure the safety and well-being of both myself and my child. In a dramatic turn of events, my confrontation with my mother-in-law reached its climax when, after enduring months of mistreatment, an unexpected ally emerged. As I lay on the bed feeling vulnerable and wronged, my plea for help was unexpectedly broadcasted through the open meeting screen, capturing the attention of my father-in-law, who witnessed the entire ordeal. Reacting swiftly to what he had seen, my father-in-law rushed home, determined to put an end to the abuse. The room was charged with tension as he confronted my mother-in-law, demanding an explanation for her actions. His presence was formidable, echoing the authority he wielded in his professional life. Yet it was clear that his outrage stemmed from a place of protective concern for both me and the unborn child. My mother-in-law, caught off guard and unable to justify her behavior, attempted to defend herself. The situation escalated when my father-in-law revealed his direct involvement in the project that had brought me into the meeting, a project that symbolized a collaborative effort between our companies and highlighted the importance of my work. The revelation that my professional contributions were integral to a project of such significance seemed to momentarily shift the power dynamics within the room. Yet, the scene took a concerning turn when, in a moment of misguided retribution, my father-in-law mimicked my mother-in-law's earlier actions against me. Despite his intentions, I couldn't condone the violence and intervened, urging him to stop. Grateful for his support, but unwilling to see harm come to anyone else, in the aftermath, I found the courage to address my mother-in-law directly, challenging her dismissive attitude toward my work and asserting my autonomy. I explained the necessity of my job and the steps I had taken to adapt my working conditions, emphasizing that her demands had repercussions beyond our household. My words were an assertion of my independence, that I was neither her servant nor someone to be belittled or controlled. Her response to my defiance was predictable. Yet in that moment, I stood my ground, empowered by the validation of my work and the support of my family. The confrontation served as a pivotal moment, one that redefined the boundaries within our household and marked a new chapter in my journey toward balancing my professional ambitions with my personal life. In a moment of confrontation, I stood my ground against my mother-in-law's attempt to physically intimidate me once more. Instead of succumbing to fear, I firmly caught her wrist, warning her against underestimating me due to my apparent calm demeanor. My assertion of self-defense seemed to take her by surprise, leading to a moment of realization for her. She looked defeated and agreed to my request to inform the person in charge of the meeting about its cancellation, allowing me some peace to concentrate on my work. Later, as my father-in-law returned to his professional commitments, I noticed a significant shift in my mother-in-law's behavior. She no longer interfered with me. This newfound tranquility allowed me to make remarkable progress in my work undisturbed, a stark contrast to the previous months of constant interruptions. That evening, as I was preparing dinner, my husband and father-in-law arrived home. My husband, having been briefed by his father about the day's events, expressed concern for my well-being. Despite the tension, I reassured him that I was all right. However, he felt the family discussion was necessary and summoned everyone to the living room. As we gathered, the atmosphere was tense, especially around my mother-in-law, who seemed anxious about the impending conversation. My husband directly addressed the day's events, prompting my mother-in-law to admit her actions. This confession seemed to weigh heavily on him, marking a moment of realization about the extent of her behavior towards me. The silence was then broken by my father-in-law's declaration of his intention to divorce, acknowledging his part in allowing the situation to escalate to this point. The announcement shocked everyone, especially my mother-in-law, who pleaded for reconsideration. However, my father-in-law stood firm in his decision. The following days saw the agreement of the divorce being put into action, with plans to remove my mother-in-law from the home. As she prepared to leave, burdened with her belongings, she sought closure, thanking me for the time spent together. At this moment, I felt compelled to address her one last time, not out of forgiveness, but perhaps to offer a final piece of advice or closure. Her expression shifted as she turned back at my call, possibly hoping for a last-minute reprieve or reconciliation. However, my words for her were not of forgiveness, but a reminder of the consequences of her actions, emphasizing the importance of respect and understanding within a family. This encounter, though brief, was a poignant reminder of the complex dynamics that had unfolded and the transformative journey we had all embarked on as a result of these tumultuous events. After my mother-in-law left the house, carrying the weight of her actions and the consequences they brought, I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and contemplation. The idea of seeking legal action against her crossed my mind, especially after her reckless behavior, but I chose a path of restraint. Instead, I sought reassurance from my father-in-law, wondering if the decision for him to divorce her was truly what he wanted. His response, filled with regret for not recognizing her true nature sooner, affirmed the necessity of the separation. In the weeks that followed, the absence of my mother-in-law brought newfound peace to the household. My work flourished without interruption, and the project initiated by my father-in-law's company progressed smoothly. While curiosity about my mother-in-law's current situation lingered, it was a distant concern compared to the tranquility and focus I now enjoyed. The question of her well-being finally found its moment over dinner one evening when my husband inquired about her. My father-in-law, with a hint of concern and curiosity in his voice, shared that he had visited her. The description of her living conditions, marked by disarray and convenient store meals, painted a stark contrast to the life she once led. Her current employment at a supermarket, supplemented by a pension, suggested a significant adjustment from her previous lifestyle. This revelation brought mixed emotions. While there was a part of me that felt vindicated, another part couldn't help but reflect on the drastic changes she had undergone. The knowledge that she was struggling did not bring joy, but a complex sense of closure. The focus now shifted to the future, particularly to the arrival of our daughter. The commitment to providing a nurturing, positive environment for her became my primary focus, ensuring she would grow up in a household defined by love, respect, and stability, far removed from the turmoil of the past. As I anticipated the birth of our daughter, the resolve to shield her from negative influences strengthened. The experience with my mother-in-law served as a poignant reminder of the values and environment I wished to cultivate for our growing family. With this vision in mind, I looked forward to welcoming our new addition with optimism and open arms. Greetings, I'm Jenny, aged 27. 3 years back, I tied the knot with Hugo, the most remarkable person I've ever met. He's a delightful goofball, overflowing with kindness and compassion, making each day feel extraordinary. Regrettably, the same sentiment doesn't extend to his mother, Maria, also known as my mother-in-law. For reasons unknown, Maria has harbored animosity toward me since day one, a sentiment I comprehend. After all, Hugo is her cherished son, and she's merely safeguarding his interests. However, I firmly believe she sometimes crosses the line. Maria has a knack for subtle injustices that seem innocent, but are actually calculated to incite frustration, painting you as the unreasonable one. We all have encountered someone like her. Unfortunately, she happens to be my mother-in-law. I was brought up differently. I'm inclined to call out nonsense and rarely hold back. Perhaps that's what drew Hugo to me. Our contrasting personalities attracting each other, as they say. Having studied psychology, I can discern Maria's ill intentions. Our dominant personalities clash, which likely led to her first words to me. "Jenny, don't you think it's time to stop eating so much?" The table fell silent, stunned. Mortification painted my face pale as Hugo Kyle, my father-in-law, and Maria's son, reacted. Hugo, though embarrassed, admonished his mother. "Mom, that's terrible to say. Jenny can eat as she pleases." Maria backpedaled, claiming concern for my well-being, citing old photos where I appeared better. Despite my embarrassment morphing into irritation, I kept calm. Not wanting to cause a scene during our initial meeting, I graciously accepted her unsolicited advice. As time passed, such incidents increased in frequency and intensity. Despite bonding with everyone, Maria remained the sole dissenter, her disdain unfounded. Even Hugo's childhood friend, Jack, embraced me. Yet Maria persisted, even on my wedding day, behaving like a bridezilla, trying to undermine me. "No, her hair should be in an updo like mine was. But you look so ugly." Maria's antics persisted, but amid the turmoil, I cherished the love and acceptance from the rest of Hugo's family. The gasps from the bridal party were audible, yet I found myself, unsurprised, having grown accustomed to such situations. In an attempt to rectify her words, my mother-in-law hastily backtracked. "Oh no, darling, that's not what I meant. You have the potential to look so much better. I see a lot of myself in Jenny. She's a bright young woman. Despite looking better at her age, I'd like to say she's beautiful in her own way." While my father-in-law managed to quell her ruthless antics on that day, the lingering pain and bitterness persisted. It went against my nature to remain silent and passive. My vibrant energy was diminishing, drained by this woman who seemed determined to undermine me. Fast forward 3 years to the current events of our story. We gathered at Hugo's childhood home, his parents' residence, for dinner on a Sunday night. My mother-in-law had graciously invited us, including Jack, indicating something significant was afoot. I had my suspicions, which were later confirmed, making the dinner plan seem more calculated. As the evening unfolded, my mother-in-law seized everyone's attention, announcing an important revelation. Armed with a paper, she began reading. "Attention, everyone. I have an announcement. Since my birthday is approaching, I want to share my plans. We're going to Hawaii." The paper confirmed the trip, met with excitement from everyone at the table. "That sounds fantastic." "What? Amazing news, Jenny. I've always wanted to go to Hawaii. This is great news. I'm so excited. Thanks so much, Ma." "Actually, you're not coming." "Honey, what do you mean? This wasn't part of the plan." I made some last-minute changes and canceled her ticket before incurring extra charges. So, my ticket was already purchased, and she just canceled it. Why does she hate me so much? Mom, what are you talking about? In the ensuing chaos, Jack and I remained silent. Harsh words flew back and forth until Maria finally offered an explanation. Okay, fine. I'll tell you why I thought Jenny shouldn't join the family event. As I'm getting older, I want to spend my remaining years with those I care about most. Unfortunately, Jenny doesn't belong on that list. Mom, really? What's wrong with you? Nothing's wrong with me. I'm just saying Jenny can't be considered family since she's not related by blood. By that logic, Jack shouldn't go either, right? He's not technically family, as you're stating. But we all know that's preposterous. He is part of the family. Since Hugo and Jenny got married, she's family too. Well, Jack is different. He's always been here, our sweet baby angel. But Jenny hasn't. I'm just not comfortable with her on the trip. It's my birthday, and I get to decide. Come on, Jenny, we're leaving. My resolute no reverberated through the room, capturing everyone's attention, including my adversary, who had been struggling to contain a smile. However, her expression turned serious at once. Maria, it's been evident from the start that you harbor disdain toward me. For 3 years, I've endured your unbearable behavior. Do you think we're blind to your actions? Do you believe we don't see your narcissism? Watch your tone, young lady. Remember, you're in my house. And it won't be for much longer. In fact, I'm about to leave. But before I go, there's something I need to say. I addressed my beloved husband, whose eyes burned with anger as he looked at his mother. Darling, I love you completely, and I've tried to weather this storm for so long. But it's clear now that your mother will never embrace me into this family, no matter how hard I try or how often I hold my tongue. She'll always find fault with me. You should go on this trip. You can't miss it. Despite her quirks, she's still your mother, and you love her, and she loves you. So go. Don't worry about me. I'll manage. Turning to my mother-in-law, who appeared stunned by my words, I continued. And as for you, unfortunately for you, I'm in love with your son, and I'm not going anywhere. You might think you can push me out, but I'm here to stay. Even in Hawaii, you'll be thinking of me because, let's be honest, I think you're fixated on me. How dare you? I ought to slap you right now. I'm not done. You're fixated on me, obsessed with tearing me down, and I can't fathom why when all I've done is extend kindness and patience, even when you didn't deserve it. But enough is enough. If you don't want me in Hawaii or consider me part of the family, fine. But I will always be here. As long as I breathe, I'll be here for Hugo, Kyle, and even Jack, but never for you. In that moment, I realized I had finally silenced her. She stood with her mouth agape, seemingly searching for words that her mind wouldn't allow. I bid farewell to the other family members, kissed my husband on the cheek, and headed towards the exit. Let me drive you home, at least. I can't let you take a cab. Don't worry about me, babe. I love you, and thank you for loving me. But I'll be fine. You have a trip to discuss. Okay, if you say you'll be fine, I'll believe you. Oh, don't forget your purse. Right, my purse. I left it in the kitchen. Upon reaching the kitchen, where Maria had retreated, presumably to catch her breath after the altercation, I encountered her. What do you want? Don't worry about me, sweetheart. I'm just here to collect my things. Well, make it quick. I want you out of my house. I can't believe you said those things to me. With that, she swiftly stormed out, too filled with anger to see me off. In that moment, I scoffed at her absurdity, grabbed my purse, and noticed a piece of paper next to it. Assuming it was the trip itinerary, I grabbed it to sneak a peek at what I was missing. As I began to read, I discovered Maria's handwriting. Dearest Jack, you've always been like a son to me, and I love you dearly. Oh, it's a letter to Jack. A bit strange, but I suppose it's thoughtful. For some reason, my curiosity led me to read further. The love and care you've shown me throughout the years will never be forgotten. Regrettably, even in my son Hugo's case, I feel the love we once shared is no longer there. Wait, is she saying she loves Jack more than Hugo? That can't be right. Persisting in reading the letter, each line intensified my astonishment. The revelations were difficult to fathom. Although I recognized it wasn't my place to read the letter, I couldn't help but be grateful for stumbling upon it. After absorbing its entirety, I paced the kitchen, contemplating my next steps. Suddenly, it struck me. Everyone who needed to know about the letter was in that room. It was time to act. Rereading the letter to confirm its contents, I sauntered into the dining room, where only 3 pairs of eyes met mine. Jenny, I am profoundly sorry for what my wife is subjecting you to. Don't worry at all. You're coming to Hawaii with us. She's just going through a rough patch right now. I'll talk to her and make her see reason. I don't know what's gotten into her, but I'll sort it out, I promise. Kyle, please don't concern yourself with me. As I mentioned, I'm fine. In fact, I've stumbled upon some interesting news that I need to share with everyone, especially Hugo. Hugo and Jack perked up, a flash of worry crossing Hugo's face. Perhaps he feared I was overwhelmed and considering a divorce. Whenever I complained about his mother, he'd empathize, marveling at how I endured her antics. I'd reassure him it was my love for him that kept me going. Noticing Maria's absence, I inquired, Where is Maria? She needs to be here for this too. I mentioned earlier. She's a bit under the weather after your confrontation. Mentioned a headache and opted for a nap upstairs. She won't be down for a while. You know how she is about her beauty sleep. Familiar with Maria's peculiar habits that often inconvenienced others, I sighed in frustration. This is crucial. She has to be here. It's okay, Jenny. You can share with us, and we'll fill her in when she wakes up. Contemplating the information I possessed, I hesitated. I wanted to witness her embarrassment. I think you should go ahead and tell us, sweetie. It's okay, and you know Hugo struggles with anxiety. It wouldn't be good to keep him waiting. True. Hugo's anxiety could escalate quickly, and I observed him beginning to fidget in anticipation. All right, I'll share with you what I found. While I was in the kitchen, gathering my purse and preparing to leave, I stumbled upon something intriguing that I believe you all need to know about. Retrieving the paper I found, I began to read aloud. It reads, Dearest Jack, you know that you have always been like a son to me, and you know that I love you dearly. And the love and care you have shown for me throughout the years will never be forgotten. I hate to admit it, but even when it comes to my son Hugo, I feel as though the love we once shared is no longer there. Hugo and I just don't see eye to eye like we used to, and honestly, I think it's because of Jenny. Ever since he married that girl, he no longer has time for me. He doesn't love me, and therefore, I don't think I love him. I love you, and you are my son. With that being said, I want to let you know that I am going to update my will so that you inherit all of my belongings and not Hugo. I know it might hurt him, but honestly, at this point, I don't care. It's that wretched Jenny girl. She's the one who has poisoned my love for him. I hope you receive this letter well. The reason why I didn't want to approach you about it in person is that, and it pains me to admit this, I couldn't risk seeing the rejection on your face. I know you love Hugo like he's your brother, and most likely you won't approve. But I don't care. I'm giving you everything, the money, the house, the cars, and even my small businesses. They're all yours, whether you like it or not. If you want to talk about this further, please call me, and we can discuss it. I look forward to hearing your response. I will love you forever and always, your second mom. After finishing the letter, I glanced up to witness a flurry of mixed emotions. Kyle appeared on the verge of tears. Jack seemed stunned, but Hugo looked like he was on the brink of losing his temper. I can't believe she said all those things. Is she serious? So, she'd exclude me from her, well, just to spite me and Jenny? She's officially lost her mind, guys. I don't even know what to say. This has gone too far. I'm fed up with her toxic behavior. What are we going to do? In that moment, I had an idea. A week passed, and it was time for the planned Hawaii trip. Maria woke up to find a letter from her husband on her bedside table. It read, Good morning, beautiful. We decided to let you catch up on your beauty sleep. Don't worry, your bags are packed. Just meet us at the airport. Maria hurriedly got ready and rushed to the airport, searching frantically for her travel companions. She tried calling them, but no one answered. Assuming they had already boarded, she boarded her flight, hoping to catch up with them in Hawaii. During the 12-hour flight, she landed and video called Kyle. Hey, Kyle. Where are you guys? I woke up late and found your note, but none of you are answering. I assumed you boarded without me. Where are you? Let's start the festivities. That won't be happening, Maria. What do you mean? Where are you? I'm at home. What? Why are you at home? You see, Maria, Jenny brought some important information to our attention last week, and since then, we decided we'd rather spend time in Florida with her than anywhere else with you. Maria gasped. You think we wouldn't find out? What, my baby? Don't baby me. You were really going to cut me out of the will, Mom. Who? How did you even find out about that? Oh, that wretched girl you despise so much. Jenny found your letter in the kitchen. I don't know what you're talking about, Maria. Lying right now is only adding more nails to the coffin. Jack, tell them, You've got to believe me. I did nothing of this sort. We all read the letter, Maria. The game is up. But I didn't do anything. Jenny is making everything up. Oh, am I? You are so pathetic. It actually makes me sick. We all know what you said and what you tried to do. Thank goodness I was nosy enough to read the whole thing. Hugo, Kyle, please. No, Maria. Enough is enough. You're done. You don't get to say anything else. You messed up big time. Your hatred has caused you to be blind. Now you have to suffer the consequences of being alone on your birthday because of what you've done. I hope you can use this time in Hawaii to reflect on your actions. But I'll be alone. It won't be fun. Maybe people would like to hang out with you more if you weren't such a raging witch. Have fun. And with that, Kyle hung up the phone. We all let out a sigh of relief. I was the first person to start laughing, eventually joined by Hugo, and before we knew it, we were all bursting with laughter at the dining table, just laughing at the sheer absurdity of the situation. The look on her face once she realized the game was up was priceless. Her face turned pale, all the blood drained from her face, and it was evident that it was the first time in a long time that she felt embarrassed. Marianne had to spend her vacation alone, frequently calling Kyle to see if he would at least come and join her because canceling the reservations she made would be expensive. But every time he kept denying it, stating that when she comes back, they were going to have to implement some ground rules if she still wanted to be married to him. Maria began to be very apologetic and frantic, a complete 180 from her usual demeanor, which was genuinely surprising. Hugo also mentioned that if Maria still wanted to be in his life, she had to make a drastic change in her attitude. Otherwise, he was ready to walk out of her life forever. Their relationship remained rocky, and Hugo asserted that if Maria ever disrespected him again, even with the smallest snide remark, he would cut her off completely, just as she had planned for him. As for Jack, he decided it was best to stop being overly accommodating to Maria, as it was clearly enabling her toxic behavior. So not only did Maria end up spending a miserable time in a beautiful place, but she also risked losing the 3 most important people in her life. She now has very strained relationships with all of them, and she has to change for the better. Regarding me, I messaged her, stating that I need time to decide if I'm going to forgive her for all of her injustices. She was apologetic and begged me to talk some sense into the men in her life. I refused, stating that this is the bed she made for herself, and now she has to lie in it. To this day, Maria is still attempting to mend the very broken relationships that she caused. I just hope she learned her lesson. That particular day, fatigue seemed to have taken a heavy toll on me. After tucking my daughter Nia into her crib, I collapsed onto my own bed and slipped into sleep almost instantly. Sometime later, I jolted awake to the sound of Nicholas crying in the dead of night. Still half asleep, I glanced at my mobile phone. 1:00 a.m., thankfully. I managed to snatch a brief nap earlier. Summoning what energy I had left, I dragged myself up, intending to comfort Nia in the living room. Just then, a sharp voice pierced the silence. "Shut up. Be quiet." Momentarily disoriented, I couldn't pinpoint the source. Perhaps it was my mother-in-law Jamie, I reckoned, yelling from her room. "Yes, I'm coming to soothe her now," I mumbled, opening the living room door. To my shock, Jamie stood over the crib, glaring at Nia. Without a second thought, she struck Nia's face. "What are you doing?" I erupted, my voice resonating louder than ever. Jamie seemed taken aback for a fleeting moment. "Why didn't you soothe her sooner? This child is so noisy," she retorted, her voice tinged with panic. Rushing to shield Nia from Jamie's aggression, I couldn't fathom the situation. Hitting a baby? It was incomprehensible. My name is Candice, a 28-year-old housewife. Once an office worker, I now focus on household chores and childcare during my maternity leave. My husband, Miles, and I moved in with Jamie, my mother-in-law, about a year ago. With Miles frequently away due to his demanding job and his concern for leaving me alone during pregnancy, coupled with Jamie's solitude following my father-in-law's passing, we decided to live together. Initially, things went smoothly, but gradually, Jamie's true colors surfaced, and truth be told, I struggled. Candy, you're awfully slow at housework, aren't you? Can't you prepare better meals? Her criticisms echoed incessantly. I apologize for the confusion, but it seems like there are some repeated sentences and inconsistencies in the provided text. However, based on the available information, here's a revised version. I regret to say that Jamie consistently harassed me whenever an opportunity arose. While Willis, her husband, was still alive, I had no issues during visits to my in-laws' house, and I didn't particularly dislike Jamie at that time. However, after Willis passed away and we started living together, Jamie transformed into an unbearably selfish and rude presence in my life. Hurry up with the housework. You're really useless, you know. She would insult me with remarks that went beyond the realm of household chores. As I was pregnant, it was only natural for me to be slower with tasks, but Jamie seemed indifferent to that reality. Her focus appeared to be on relentlessly harassing me, with Miles frequently away on business trips, returning home only around midnight, even when not traveling. I found myself spending most of my days with Jamie. I clung to the hope that things would change once the baby arrived. I believed that living with her grandchild would soften Jamie, despite her rough demeanor. Desperately holding onto that hope, I consulted Miles about it on WhatsApp, ensuring not to disrupt his work. He expressed genuine regret, wishing he could be there for me during tough times. He also took care to admonish Jamie when they met, providing me with a slight sense of relief. Having Miles on my side made it somewhat more bearable when Jamie scolded me for not handling housework well enough during pregnancy. Eventually, I safely gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Blessedly, Miles managed to obtain permission from his company, citing the birth of our child. He left work early and rushed to the hospital just before I gave birth. When he held our newborn daughter, he marveled at her angelic cuteness, expressing genuine happiness. I, too, felt joy in bringing into the world the child of the man I love. I informed Jamie about the birth of our healthy baby girl through WhatsApp, assuming she might visit the hospital since we shared a living space. To my surprise, Jamie didn't show up, and she didn't respond on WhatsApp. The concern arose. Could she be uninterested in her granddaughter? Anxiety crept in as I pondered whether the harassment would persist even in this new chapter. As I grappled with these thoughts, the hospital room door swung open. "Candice, how are you feeling?" "Wow, what a cute baby. It's a girl, right? She's going to be beautiful." It was my sister-in-law, La, who came to visit. La, kind and cheerful, had always been supportive. Married with children herself, I had decided to turn to her for parenting advice. "What's her name?" she inquired. Miles and I had chosen the name Nia. "Oh, that's a nice name. Wait, hasn't Mom come?" I explained that I had contacted Jamie, but received no response. La chuckled. "She's really a pain sometimes, isn't she? Unpredictable and lacking common sense." I agreed, appreciating La's straightforward nature. She had once encouraged me to vent to her about living with Jamie, understanding Jamie's difficult personality. La refrained from admonishing Jamie unless absolutely necessary, knowing it could backfire on me. Little did I know that life would become more challenging after Nicholas was born. Upon returning home from the hospital with Nicola, Jamie seemed to ignore the baby's existence entirely. Instead, she demanded, "Hurry up and clean." Stunned, I placed Nicola in her crib and began cleaning. Jamie, about 5 minutes later, started yelling, "Candy, come here." Perplexed, I approached, and Jamie complained about the baby's crying. "Do something about her," she insisted, referring to Nicola as that baby and treating her as a nuisance. Jamie's mistreatment continued, criticizing Nicola's cries and yelling derogatory remarks. Each time Jamie yelled, Nicola cried louder, creating an uncomfortable atmosphere. Frustrated, I implored, "Her name is Nicola. Can you please call her by her name?" "Shut up. Don't tell me what to do. You're her mother. It's your job to take care of her and make sure I'm comfortable, Jamie retorted. Look, she's crying again. Nicola's cries had escalated due to Jamie's harsh words, creating a distressing environment for both the baby and me. After putting Nicola to bed, I had to halt my chores and attend to her soothing needs. Yet even this interruption incurred Jamie's displeasure. Upon returning to my chores after settling Nicola, Jamie exclaimed, "Ah, this is really in the way, takes up so much space," as she kicked the crib. The crib shook, and Nicola woke up crying again. "What are you doing, Jamie? Shut up. It's your fault for insisting on putting such a big thing here," I retorted, exasperated. Yet it was Jamie who had suggested placing the bed in the living room to mitigate noise disturbances at night. "Are you complaining to me now? Stop arguing and soothe that noisy child," Jamie snapped, referring to Nicola in a derogatory manner. The situation felt untenable. Balancing household chores and childcare without incurring Jamie's wrath was proving increasingly challenging, and my exhaustion mounted. The constant criticism added to the strain. If I focused too much on childcare, I'd be scolded for being slow at housework, I lamented internally. And if I focus on chores, I'd be berated for my parenting, I added, feeling the weight of the conflicting expectations. With Miles away on a business trip for about 2 months, I felt the burden keenly. Attempts to seek solace and guidance from him over WhatsApp and phone calls were met with apologies and brief conversations. His apologies only added to my guilt, knowing he was working tirelessly for our family. Then, fatigue and stress reached a breaking point one night. Exhausted, I fell asleep soon after putting Nicola in her crib. In the wee hours, Nicola's cries roused me from slumber. Groggy, I checked my phone. 1 a.m., thankfully. I had managed a brief nap earlier. Summoning what little energy remained, I prepared to soothe Nicola in the living room. However, my efforts were interrupted by a commanding voice shouting, "Shut up, be quiet." Confused, I initially thought Jamie was berating me from her room. Resignedly, I responded, "Yes, I'm coming to soothe her now," and opened the living room door. To my shock, Jamie stood over the crib, glaring at Nicola. Without warning, she struck Nicola's face, prompting me to erupt in protest louder than ever before. Jamie seemed momentarily surprised by my outburst, caught off guard by the force of my reaction. "Why didn't you soothe her sooner? She's so noisy, this child." Jamie yelled back in a panic. Reacting swiftly, I rushed to the crib, lifting Nicola to shield her from Jamie's unwarranted aggression. The disbelief struck me hard. Hitting a 3-month-old baby. Could this person really be human? Nicola's cries escalated to a pitch I had never heard before, and her tiny face had turned a shade of red that sent shivers down my spine. In immediate distress, I dialed an ambulance. At the hospital, the doctor examined Nicola and assured me that, while her face was red, there was no concern about bruises or injuries. A wave of relief washed over me, but I felt on the verge of collapsing. The doctor inquired, "What happened? Did you drop her on the floor or something?" I explained the situation to the doctor when my sister-in-law, entered the room. In my panic, I had called Illa while in the ambulance. Miles was on a business trip and couldn't come immediately, so I reached out to Illa despite the late hour. Illa described Jamie hitting Nicola to the doctor, leaving him speechless, and she herself shook with anger. The next day, I returned home with Illa, bracing myself for the confrontation. I entered the house alone, and Jamie, acting as if nothing happened, continued harassing me as usual. "You're late. Hurry up and make breakfast. You missed taking out the trash because you came home in the morning. You really can't do housework," she berated. Exasperated, I interjected, "Enough. Did you forget what happened yesterday? You hit a 3-month-old baby, remember? How can you act so normally? First, apologize for yesterday." Jamie's face reddened with anger. "What? Why should I apologize? That child was the noisy one. I just slapped her because she wouldn't listen. It's a part of discipline. I thought she wouldn't be quiet otherwise." That's not discipline, it's violence. Enough with the noise. Just do your chores already. I asserted, my voice firm. You don't regret it at all. Don't even think you did anything wrong. I called for Lila to enter the living room. La, please come in. Jamie was taken aback. Mom, what are you doing? I can't believe you did such a thing. No, Jamie stammered, flustered by Layla's sudden arrival. Mom, you do realize that what you did is legally punishable, right? Layla pointed out, her tone stern. Jamie's face turned pale. Lila, you're not going to sue your own mother, are you? Jamie pleaded, attempting to downplay the severity of her actions. Lila corrected her. The one who's going to sue is Candice. I'll just be her lawyer. But wait, it was just a part of her education. Who would agree that hitting a baby is education? This is a case of assault, I asserted firmly. No matter how much Jamie tried to justify her actions, such behavior could never be excused. I'll definitely sue you. Be prepared, I warned Jamie, determined to seek justice. At that moment, Jamie began to cry quietly. I'm sorry, Candy. I'd always lose control when I get angry and end up regretting it later. I've always been depressed and regretful about how I treated you and Nia. I truly am sorry for what happened. Why did I raise my hand to her? Jamie continued speaking through her tears, expressing remorse. I'd always wanted a boy for the eldest grandson. It was also Willis's wish. It might be an old-fashioned thought, but we always hoped for a boy to carry on the family line. And when a girl was born instead, I was happy about the birth of a granddaughter, but also felt like I failed to fulfill a promise to Willis. And every time I got angry, I couldn't control myself. I'm really sorry. Jamie, please calm down. Let's talk properly first, I suggested, trying to diffuse the tension. However, Jamie persisted. No, I've done something terrible. No amount of apologies will ever be enough. She kept apologizing repeatedly, and I felt my heart waver, almost considering forgiveness. But then Leela spoke up. Don't take her seriously, Candy. Mom always pretends to be deeply remorseful like this when she's cornered, just to end criticism against her. She did the same when Dad found out about her affair. He forgave her because he fell for her act, but her tears dried up immediately afterward. This is probably just an act too, right? You can't fool me. Leela's astute observation made Jamie falter. What are you saying, Lila? I examined Jamie closely, realizing that the tears that were flowing heavily just a moment ago had already dried up. It was likely fake crying. Jamie, I can't forgive you anymore. How twisted can you be to try to weasel out of what you've done? Wait a minute. I'm not trying to escape anything, okay? Okay, I understand, but we've already decided to take legal action, I asserted. As I spoke, Jamie's face turned red with anger. Don't joke with me. Why should I be subjected to this by a daughter-in-law like you? How insolent. Just then, the sound of the house key turning was heard. Candice, is Nicholas safe? Miles' voice echoed through the tense atmosphere. Why are you here? I was taken aback. I had only contacted him on WhatsApp. I thought Miles couldn't come since he was on a business trip. I had called him several times in the middle of the night, but then he drove straight here. Miles had been driving since 3:00 a.m. and arrived this morning. I didn't know Miles was coming too. Mom, cut it out. I've been hearing about your harassment from Candy, and I've been warning you every time, haven't I? And now you've gone and hit my precious Nicola. I'll never forgive you for this, Mom, Miles declared sternly. Even you're blaming me? How cruel. After I raised you and Jamie retorted, her voice tinged with indignation. What are you talking about? You always left us with Aunt to play around. Our memories are filled with the meals Aunt cooked, not you, Mom. Just give it up. Besides, I think the doctor already reported it yesterday. The hospital knows Mom hit her, so I think it's just a matter of time before the police come. Bella chimed in, her tone resolute. No, wait. You're okay with your mother being arrested? I'd rather not have someone who hits a 3-month-old baby around. No matter what you say, Mom, you have no one on your side now, Miles countered, his voice unwavering. Jamie finally seemed to understand her situation, her face pale and slumped. Soon, the police arrived, and Jamie was arrested. As a first-time offender, she received a suspended sentence. However, Miles and Ella cut ties with her and issued restraining orders against her. Miles moved out of the in-laws' house with me and Nicola, renting an apartment while looking for a permanent place. We stayed briefly with Lila, which was a great help. Candice, I'm really sorry for everything. I'll take parental leave if I can't get it. I'll change departments or even jobs to ensure Nicholas's safety, Miles promised earnestly. His dedication filled me with hope. His company had some issues with the working environment, and he couldn't get parental leave, so he resigned and found another job. Now he comes home on time, helps with Nicola and the housework. We live in a high-rise near Liz family, often gathering for meals or enjoying barbecues. I don't know what's become of Jamie, but I heard from neighbors that after her arrest, she's become completely isolated and doesn't go out anymore. Prideful Jamie probably can't bear being known as someone who did such terrible things. Well, it doesn't matter to me anymore. She doesn't know where we moved, so there's no chance of meeting her unexpectedly. I plan to live happily, supporting each other as a family with Miles, Nicola, and Lila's family. Listen up, folks. I need to share something that came to light recently about my wife, Sherry. It turns out she was involved in a relationship with a younger man. I've got the evidence right here, and I want you all to take a look. These pictures were taken during a family gathering, and what unfolded next was quite unexpected. During our annual family get-together, my husband, Neil, abruptly stood up and declared to everyone that I was having an affair. He distributed the photos to 15 relatives, including in-laws. As everyone examined the pictures, confusion spread across their faces. Some questioned Neil, demanding an explanation. "What's this all about, Neil?" they asked. Sure, the photos showed Sherry with a young man in a suit, but it wasn't immediately clear what was going on. Neil persisted, pointing out that the suit was an expensive luxury brand, insinuating that Sherry had been secretly meeting with this well-dressed guy. To add fuel to the fire, he presented another photo featuring a different man than the one in the suit. My father-in-law and mother-in-law, standing together, were visibly shocked. My mother-in-law, in disbelief, questioned Sherry about the truth. Sherry admitted to meeting these two men without informing Neil, expressing regret for not being forthright. In response, Neil seemed disappointed but took pride in his perceived victory. He emphasized Sherry's admission, claiming, "Did you hear what she just said? She said she could never tell me. Of course, she can't tell me that she was a married woman seducing two young men." A heavy silence descended upon the room as Neil declared his separation from Sherry. The atmosphere grew cold, and tension filled the air. Amidst the solemnity, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. "What are you saying?" I exclaimed, unable to contain my disbelief. I felt a wave of sadness wash over me. I couldn't believe how foolish I had been. My words didn't just elicit a reaction from my husband. They resonated with all our relatives gathered there. It wasn't surprising that those suspected of cheating on my husband found my situation amusing. Their laughter seemed to pierce through the icy tension in the room, fueled by anger and disbelief. My father-in-law, however, broke the silence and addressed me sternly. "Sherry, what are you thinking, laughing in a situation like this? Such an attitude, while bowing down, is unforgivable." I felt compelled to apologize, but I couldn't deny the humor in the situation. "I'm sorry, sir, but it truly was amusing. I couldn't help it. I was merely conversing with these two men," I explained, rising to my feet, joined by my husband. Taking a deep breath, I continued, revealing the real reason for my secrecy. I couldn't tell Neil because I was investigating his affair with them. My revelation left the room in stunned silence once more, the atmosphere heavy with tension. I admitted to meeting these men, but I vehemently denied any infidelity on my part. It was time to address the situation head-on and end my relationship with Neil. But as soon as I made my decision known, my husband lunged at me, incredulous at my explanation. You were investigating my affair. What kind of excuse is that? No one here would believe such a story. Come clean, admit you're cheating, and apologize to all of us. His accusations felt like a slap in the face, his disbelief palpable. But I refused to back down. It's not a ludicrous excuse. Who's kidding whom here? Lying about my fidelity? Anyone can see through that, I retorted, my resolve unwavering. My in-laws, bewildered by my newfound assertiveness, pressed for clarity. Sherry, what did you mean about Neil's affair? I can't make sense of any of this. Please explain, they implored, seeking understanding in the midst of chaos. I took a moment to gather my thoughts before responding. I'm just like him, I admitted, turning to address my stepfather and stepmother. I was planning to discuss this with you both later when we have more time. I must apologize for the sudden twist in events. Allow me to clarify the situation step by step. The man in the suit I was meeting with happens to be a lawyer. I sought his advice regarding my husband's affair. As soon as I mentioned the word lawyer, my in-laws appeared even more perplexed. To shed light on the matter, I picked up one of the photos my husband had distributed and directed their attention to the lawyer's badge on his suit, though it was barely visible in the picture. Approximately 6 months ago, Neil underwent a noticeable transformation. He had never been particularly concerned about his appearance, but suddenly he began purchasing high-end products without informing me. Earlier, he remarked that the suit in question belonged to a very expensive luxury brand. It seemed that he had picked up this habit during his newfound attention to personal grooming. As I explained, my in-laws and relatives listened in silence, but my husband's face turned red with immediate denial. He questioned my accusations, asking what was wrong with being well-dressed. He assumed I was accusing him of infidelity solely based on his appearance, dismissing it as an improbable excuse. I clarified that his attire was not the sole reason for my suspicion. I had confronted the issue directly by speaking with the woman he was allegedly involved with. Astonishingly, her husband had approached me first, initiating the conversation. Turning to my in-laws, I pointed out the photo my husband had given to my father-in-law, revealing the other man in the suit as the spouse of Neil's supposed lover. Neil, still in disbelief, exclaimed, "Are you being serious? Is this some kind of coincidence? It's hard for me to believe." I couldn't believe it myself when Jimmy, a close friend of mine and the husband of the woman my husband was cheating with, sought my advice. It was a startling revelation. For the past 6 months, Jimmy suspected his wife of infidelity and confided in me about it. In collaboration with Jimmy, we decided to hire a private investigator to delve into the matter. Unexpectedly, Neil's name emerged during the investigation, along with evidence of Jimmy's wife's affair. She had already confessed to cheating on Jimmy. What astonished me further was the discovery that Neil had falsely claimed to be single, leaving Jimmy's wife shocked to learn of my existence. Regardless, the affair itself was unforgivable. Reflecting on the events, I retrieved an envelope from my bag containing crucial evidence. Distributing it to my in-laws and relatives, I revealed the truth. Neil had accused me of infidelity when, in fact, he was the one engaged in an affair. My laughter earlier wasn't out of amusement, but rather disbelief at Neil's audacity and stupidity. He assumed I was oblivious to his deceit, but his actions spoke volumes. As I spoke, a mixture of anger and disappointment resonated in the room. My in-laws and relatives grasped the gravity of the situation. Neil's behavior wasn't just deceitful, it was reprehensible. The evidence of his affair had been meticulously gathered, and his cheating partner had confessed. Now, it was Neil who owed our relatives an apology. The tables had turned drastically. However, Neil's response took an unexpected turn. I must admit, I was the one involved in an affair, but my husband's explanation shifted the blame entirely onto me, claiming it was Sherry's fault. According to him, since we had no children due to Sherry's infertility, she was essentially useless, unable to fulfill the societal expectation of bearing children and taking care of household chores. This justification left the faces of my parents-in-law and other relatives even more somber. It's true that we had been married for about 3 years without being able to conceive, prompting me to undergo fertility treatment. I had asked my husband to join me in the process, but he was uncooperative, placing the blame squarely on me. He insisted on having children but was unwilling to undergo the necessary steps, providing only the specimen and leaving the rest to me. My father-in-law couldn't contain his frustration at my husband's selfishness and raised his voice, challenging the notion of Sherry being deemed useless. He questioned the idea of discarding her like a tool when she wasn't needed, highlighting how Sherry's support in our marriage had ensured an uninterrupted life. Father-in-law emphasized that household chores and bearing children were not to be taken for granted. The tension among the in-laws intensified, and my nerves were on edge. Some relatives, including housewives like me, were deeply offended by my husband's assertion that it was common sense for women to handle housework and bear children. It was not just a personal insult, but a broader affront to housewives and individuals facing infertility worldwide. My husband's narrow perspective became apparent. He only considered what was directly in front of him, oblivious to the complexities faced by others. In this tense atmosphere, my father-in-law expressed his anger, making it clear that my husband's mindset was flawed and superficial. Despite the tension, my husband astonishingly uttered the impossible words, treating Sherry as if she were a tool and deeming her even less valuable due to infertility. I've reconsidered, and I want to thank Sherry. You're right, Dad. I want to be happy, and having a child is essential for that. Do you understand? My father-in-law, veins almost bursting from his intense emotions, leaned in close to my husband, who is my mother-in-law, and had to step in to intervene. Neil, I know you want a child, but cheating on Sherry and deceiving us was not the way to go about it. Why did you accuse her of cheating on you? Is it just to avoid paying alimony? Pretending she cheated allows you to get a divorce and receive alimony. That's why I did it. Well, even if I fail, I can always pay for it to resolve everything. My mother-in-law, almost losing herself, tried to confront him physically, but my father-in-law stopped her, urging her to calm down. He reasoned, beating up a guy like this only hurts you. He doesn't even deserve your punch, but he's our son, and we can't just keep quiet about it. You're older, Mom, you need to calm down. I thought that was a good way to go about it, but I can't help it. Sherry and I are getting a divorce soon, and I'm moving out of the house. Sherry, I'll pay you alimony too, so don't complain, okay? And don't come crying back to me about how much you miss me. Whatever, do what you want. You're the one who should better not come crying back to me after our divorce. I'm not going to cry for you, you idiot. Well, this will be the last time, so I'll just hear you say goodbye, Sherry. What do you have to say? All the relatives were already in a state of anger, beyond furious at him, who was swearing to the very end. In the midst of this, I smiled at him and gave him a few words. You said you'd throw me away because I'm infertile. But that's a funny thing to say because I'm not infertile. You are. What? What'd you just say? I'm not infertile, and now you're throwing me away. I don't care anymore, though. You've not only deceived me, but also your mom and dad and all your relatives. You were way out of line as a person, and I don't even want to breathe the same air with you anymore. Hey, Sherry, answer my question. What did you just say? That I'm infertile? My husband, who had been unbothered so far, was finally upset. I'm not bluffing. It was you who was infertile, not me. When I asked for fertility treatment, you blamed me and were uncooperative. You just gave me the specimen and left the rest to me. And that's when I found out that you were infertile. Screw you. You're lying, aren't you? You're lying just to get me in trouble, aren't you? I don't believe you. I don't need your belief anymore. It doesn't matter now that I know the truth about you. My husband desperately interrogated me. My in-laws and other relatives were unaware of his infertility, and it must have been surprising for them. However, the revelation no longer held significance. The consensus among the relatives was clear: my husband and I should get a divorce. It may not matter to you, But it matters to me, Sherry. Why didn't you tell me? I wanted kids, didn't you know? He questioned. I explained that I had tried to tell him, but he wouldn't listen. Instead, I sought advice from my friend Jimmy, only to discover that Jimmy's wife was having an affair with my husband. I'm never going to be able to have kids, maybe with fertility treatments, maybe not. Well, for someone like you who doesn't value your family, I don't think you'll be able to continue your fertility treatments. Infertility treatment is hard work, and with the support of your family, you might have been able to continue. But you no longer have anyone to rely on, so why don't you just give up? I declared. He looked to his in-laws and relatives for support. But after all the inhumane things he had said and done, no one answered him. In the end, I divorced my husband, and Jimmy divorced his wife. We both filed for alimony, and Jim's wife blamed Neil for her divorce, causing him constant trouble. Despite his ongoing pursuit of having kids through fertility treatments, he struggled to find a marriage partner due to the repercussions of his actions. A few years later, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl. After my divorce, I remarried, even though I never thought it would happen. My current husband, who has also experienced divorce, expressed his desire to start a new life with me. We support each other, and my daughter is growing up in a happy environment. However, I don't take it for granted. I still believe. My mother-in-law said something really hurtful to me while we were at a restaurant. She made it clear she didn't think I belonged there. She even hinted that because I wasn't her blood relative, I didn't matter as much. It made me so mad that I wanted to leave right away. As I got up to go, she stopped me and told me to pay for the meal if I was leaving early. But I wasn't about to pay for someone else's food after being treated like that. I stood my ground and refused. My name is Maya, and I work in an office. My husband Terrell and I are happy together, except for one big problem, his mom. She's always criticizing me and meddling in our lives. Even when I tell Terrell about it, he doesn't see the problem. He thinks she's just being a caring mom, but I know better. As time went on, my mother-in-law's interference in our lives got even worse. She had a key to our house, given to her by my husband, and she just let herself in whenever she pleased. She criticized everything and spread rumors about me to our neighbors. I begged my husband to move us somewhere else, but he didn't seem to care much, too caught up in his work. Then, something changed. He got a big promotion and a raise thanks to a successful project. Seeing this as our chance to make a fresh start, I suggested we start a family. Now that we have more money, maybe it's time to think about having kids, I said, hoping this would make him realize how toxic his mother's behavior was. But he had another idea. He thought if we were going to have children, we should live in a town that's better for them. There aren't many places for kids to go here, like daycare centers or parks. Shouldn't we move somewhere more family-friendly? Finally, he agreed to move, which made me even happier than his promotion did. But that happiness didn't last long. The next day, my mother-in-law showed up unannounced like she always did. I was annoyed, thinking she was going to start criticizing again, but something seemed off this time. I want to celebrate my son's promotion, so I've booked a fancy restaurant. It's really expensive, but it's classy. The food is amazing, and the staff is great. Everyone says good things about it, she told me, inviting me to come along. Sounds nice. Good for you, I said, trying to be polite, even though I was still not happy with her. Well, forget about your schedule. I really want you to come to this restaurant, she insisted. I'll take a look at my schedule, but I'm not sure if I can make it, I said. Don't say that. We really want you there, she insisted, not taking no for an answer. Even though I responded that way, she just smirked and left. It was strange because she had been excluding me before, but now she was inviting me and insisting that she'd wait. Something didn't feel right. When I asked my husband about it later, he said he had already promised his mother that we would go together. She had booked that restaurant specifically for us, and he was excited about it. Don't you feel the same way, Maya? He asked. Sorry, but I'm not excited about it. I'm worried about how much money we'll spend at such an expensive place. I really don't want to go. Just tell them I have something urgent and go enjoy yourself, I replied. Feeling uneasy about the situation. Why are you being so negative? Plus, it's not just us going to the restaurant. My brothers are bringing their wives too. It wouldn't look good if you weren't there with the whole family, my husband insisted, excited about going to a fancy restaurant for the first time. Even though I didn't want to go, I felt like I had to. My husband wasn't listening to me anymore. If he trusted my mother-in-law more than me, I decided to secretly record her behavior with a voice recorder I bought online. I had a feeling she would continue her harassment at the celebration. I planned to record it and play it for my husband later. If he still didn't believe me, I was ready to consider divorce. Making that decision made me feel a little better. Still, the day we were supposed to meet my mother-in-law at the restaurant felt really gloomy, and I couldn't stop sighing. I barely knew my husband's brothers, having only met them at the wedding, and I hadn't really talked to their wives beyond saying hello. When we got to the restaurant, the waiter led us to a big room where my mother-in-law, my husband's other brother and his wife, and the third brother and his wife were already sitting. There was one empty seat at the table. My husband looked confused. Did the waiter make a mistake with the seats? He wondered out loud. I'll go ask. Everyone, go ahead and start eating, he said, leaving the room. As soon as he left, my mother-in-law stood up, her face looking mean. There's no seat for you. Why would I invite a stranger who just married my son to a family celebration? She said, sounding really rude. So you have a choice. Prove you really want to be part of this family or leave and never come back. Decide now. I'm leaving, I said right away. My mother-in-law looked surprised for a moment. Did she really think I'd beg her to accept me as family after this? No way. Listen to me carefully. If you foot the entire bill for everyone here, I'll acknowledge you as Terrell's wife. I understand you must be feeling frustrated being treated like an outsider, so pay up and become part of the family, she demanded. I already told you I'm leaving. Why should I cover the expenses for someone else's family gathering? I shot back, turning away from her. My mother-in-law banged her hand on the table and yelled, Can't you see? I'm offering you a chance to be part of the family. Are you really okay with remaining a stranger? Pay up? No, I'm perfectly fine being seen as a stranger. And since I'm not family, I won't be paying for your meal. Goodbye, mother-in-law, I said firmly, and I walked out. She tried to catch up to me, but by the time she reached the entrance of the room, I was already at the exit of the restaurant. When I got home, planning to email my husband about what happened, he surprisingly returned within just 10 minutes. The waiter confirmed that there was no mistake with the reservation, and my mom was causing a scene, he explained. It seemed like my decision to stand up for myself had inspired the wives of my husband's brothers as well. They had been enduring my mother-in-law's mistreatment silently, but seeing me speak up gave them the courage to do the same. In a bold move, both of them left the restaurant, and our husbands, the eldest and third sons, hurriedly followed them. I was prepared for my mother-in-law's backlash, and sure enough, within 3 hours, the phone started ringing nonstop. It was so disruptive that I eventually blocked her calls. However, one call managed to get through from an unknown number. Hello, sorry for calling so late. Is this Maya's mobile phone? The man on the other end introduced himself as a police officer from the nearby police station. He informed me that after everyone left, my mother-in-law tried to eat what she could and then attempted to make me pay the bill. However, the restaurant staff, already unhappy with her behavior earlier, refused her request. They thought I wouldn't come back to pay after leaving upset. Ignoring her calls, my mother-in-law was advised to pay by card. But she didn't have one and didn't bring enough cash to cover everyone's meals. Desperate, she tried reaching out to other family members to help cover the costs, but no one responded. Frustrated and angry, she started yelling and blamed me entirely for the situation. Her anger got worse, and she ended up breaking expensive vases and flower pots in the restaurant. This caused the restaurant to call the police. The officers managed to calm my mother-in-law down. but she refused to admit any fault. The restaurant didn't get paid, and they had a difficult customer on their hands. They asked the police to escort her home. Feeling guilty for ignoring a call from the police, my husband and I reluctantly went back to the restaurant. When we arrived, the police were trying to calm my mother-in-law down. When she saw me, she glared and yelled, "You're useless. This mess happened because you didn't pay the bill. It's only natural to help your mother, isn't it? Pay up now." I was completely shocked when my mother-in-law said something almost threatening, even with the police around. They had already made it clear that if no one took her home, they would either drive her to her in-laws' house in a patrol car or arrest her for leaving without paying. "Please take her away, arrest her, or do whatever you need to do. Just make her take responsibility," I said firmly, my voice firm and determined. My mother-in-law looked shocked at my words. "How could you say something so heartless? I can't believe it. Just pay the bill. It's bad luck to have a family member arrested," she pleaded. "I don't care. I'm not family, and I don't want to be associated with someone who's acting irrationally and causing a disturbance," I replied firmly, trying to leave the restaurant and leave the situation for the police to handle. However, my husband, who had stayed quiet until now, gave me a stern look. "I understand that what happened to Maya was awful, but is it really serious enough to warrant arrest?" he asked, defending his mother. "You're missing the point. She's in trouble with the police because she tried to leave without paying and caused a scene. It has nothing to do with me. Or are you suggesting that I should be responsible for paying for 6 people's meals, even though I didn't eat?" I countered. My husband fell silent, but walked past me towards the police and the restaurant staff. I knew what he was planning to do. Expecting his actions, I called out to him as he walked away. "If you're going to pay for her meal and compensate them, we're getting divorced. Think about that." My husband didn't say anything in response to my words and silently took out his wallet. Feeling hurt and betrayed, I left the restaurant and walked back home along the familiar road. I began packing my essential belongings, getting ready to leave. Just before the day changed, my husband finally returned. "Mom's not getting arrested. It seems she was really in the wrong. But the restaurant said they'd forgive her if I compensated them and promised she'd never come back. I didn't have nearly enough money, so I had my brothers come and help." "Oh, I'm so tired," he explained, his voice sounding exhausted. He kept talking about what happened after I left, seeming irritated by my lack of response. Then he noticed my packed bags and approached me. "Hey, what's with these bags?" he asked, looking confused. "I'm getting ready to leave because we're getting divorced. I told you that if you sided with her, we get divorced. You can't say you didn't hear me, neither can you," I replied firmly. My husband looked down at me, his eyes filled with astonishment. Then he lifted his gaze and began to shout, "What's happening? You've been acting so strange today. I understand that Mom did something terrible, but why do we have to get divorced? I've told you I'm being mistreated, asked, and even with evidence and others backing me up, you still choose your almost arrested mother over me. Isn't it weird that I want to divorce someone who acts like that? I've had enough." He kept saying things, but I didn't really listen. I focused on leaving the house and getting ready for the divorce. The next morning, I went straight to get the divorce papers. When I signed and handed them to my husband, he made a scene about not wanting to divorce. But when I mentioned getting a lawyer involved, he reluctantly signed, and I sent the papers off right away. Finally, I was free to be on my own again. Later on, my husband moved out and went to live with his parents. Turns out, he relied on me a lot for housework, so he couldn't manage it alone. The house soon became a mess. Not liking the untidy environment, he ended the apartment lease and went back to his parents' house. In addition, the eldest and third sons experienced similar outcomes. On the day my husband called them to help with the compensation, they each had arguments with their wives. The wives refused to pay for something that was their mother's fault, but the brothers decided to use their savings to assist their mother without consulting their wives. This led to heated arguments and cooled feelings of love. resulting in discussions of divorce. Both brothers ended up returning to their parents' homes and refusing to do any housework. Ultimately, my mother-in-law and her 3 immature sons also moved back to their parents' house. This situation became a source of gossip among the neighbors, who spread rumors that the wives had abandoned all 3 brothers. Mother-in-law dismissed these rumors, defending her sons and blaming their wives for their troubles. Upon hearing the story, my husband nodded smugly, convinced that divorcing them was the right decision. However, my relationship with the neighbors remained good, and they didn't believe the rumors. They knew about my mother-in-law's unpleasant personality and kept their distance, quietly amused by her antics. As time went on, my mother-in-law gained a reputation as a failed parent who couldn't raise her sons properly. Meanwhile, my ex-husbands earned the label of mama's boys in the neighborhood for siding with their mother instead of standing up for their wives. Despite their persistent attempts to contact me, I changed all my contact details and moved to a new house. They couldn't find us, and they spent their days constantly complaining. Since cutting ties with my mother-in-law and the others, my life has become much more enjoyable. Being free from the stress of dealing with her is a huge relief, and making new friends has been wonderful. During the divorce process, I bonded with the ex-wives of my ex-husband's brothers over our shared frustrations with my mother-in-law. Now, we often go out for meals and enjoy shopping together on weekends. I even find myself grateful to my ex-husband for introducing me to such wonderful friends. In 2 days, we're all planning to visit a new cafe. We can finally do what we want, and it feels incredibly liberating. I want to lead my own life without getting caught up in toxic relationships, and I'm genuinely thankful for the friendships I've found. I believe I would still be feeling lonely if it weren't for them. I'm truly grateful, and I hope these friendships last a lifetime. I'm Karen, age 27, and my husband Stephen is also 27. We tied the knot just last year, both juggling full-time jobs. I work as a nurse, and Stephen is in pharmaceutical sales. Our paths had crossed before, but it was at a coworker's happy hour event that we truly connected. Being a fan of good drinks, the after-work cocktails that evening were especially delightful. Though we had encountered each other previously, that night marked the first time we engaged in meaningful conversation. Our drink preferences aligned, and we hit it off effortlessly. Each encounter thereafter was enjoyable and easy, quickly leading us into a dating relationship. On my birthday, Stephen opened up about his feelings, and we officially became a couple. Our favorite dates revolve around discovering hidden gems that offer excellent drinks. I'm partial to wine, while Stephen leans towards sake. Our differing tastes add a fun dynamic, allowing us to share and learn new things from one another. As our relationship progressed, thoughts of marriage started to occupy my mind. It was during this time that I delved into Stephen's background. His parents had divorced when he was young, and he never knew his father, being raised by his single mom with whom he shares a close bond. Stephen has never moved out of his family home. Initially, I questioned whether this was a flaw or a testament to his strong family values. Love often clouds judgment, and at that point, I viewed it as a positive trait. Stephen is not only kind but incredibly handsome, and I struggled to find any flaws. Feeling fortunate to be married to the seemingly perfect man, I was unaware of the daunting married life that awaited me. Before our wedding, I frequently shared meals with my mother-in-law, who always spoke highly of me to Stephen, saying, "Karen is like a daughter to me. Don't let her get away, marry her soon." Hearing those words always brought me joy, and I eagerly anticipated officially becoming part of the family. Steve, who had a knack for connecting with people, also had an excellent reputation with my parents. The wedding went off without a hitch, reflecting our shared preference for avoiding the limelight. Post-wedding, Stephen made the significant move out of his family home for the first time. However, out of concern for his mom, we opted for an apartment just a 10-minute walk from his family residence. In hindsight, that choice proved to be a mistake, but regrets come too late. The dynamic with my mother-in-law shifted drastically after the wedding. Once treating me like a daughter, she transformed into someone who seemed to view me as a mortal enemy. visiting our home daily. With care, I approached Stephen, expressing, I appreciate your mom's visits, but it's challenging for me to relax. Could you ask her to come less frequently on workdays? Stephen's response was unexpected as he asserted, Why? We're family now. Mom gets lonely, she loves to talk, and she hates being alone. I wish she would be more understanding. This is my home too, and I can't convey something I don't believe. If you have something to say it yourself. I won't. It was a surprising turn, and Stephen's refusal to consider my perspective left me taken aback. From that day forward, any mention of his mother made Stephen moody, prompting me to withhold my thoughts to avoid further arguments. My mother-in-law took advantage of the situation, and before I realized it, Stephen had given her a spare key. One day, I returned home to find my mother-in-law cooking in our kitchen without permission. Surprised to discover her in my personal space, my tone turned assertive. What are you doing, mother-in-law? You can't just come in here without asking, she retorted. What's going on with your fridge? It's practically empty. I have never seen such a lifeless fridge. Do you even cook? Don't tell me you're always buying deli items. Unable to hold back any longer, I responded. I shop for fresh ingredients daily. I've heard your fridge is always packed like a traffic jam. It's impressive you can manage that. I just bought ingredients today. Sure, we have deli days, but I also cook to save money. And by the way, deli food these days is pretty good. Haven't you ever tried it? Mother-in-law wasn't backing down. I'll listen to you. I would rather not have Stephen eat food when we don't even know who made it. This is what happens when he marries an incompetent wife. I should have taught him to be more discerning about women. Sparks ignited between us, and once I began expressing my grievances, words poured out uncontrollably. Do you see the shopping bag, mother-in-law? Not a single deli item in it. I'm busy, so could you please not get in my way? You're not even a guest anymore. You let yourself in. Mother-in-law stormed out, her face flushed with anger. I'll tell Stephen about this. I had more to say, but she left. Despite feeling uncomfortable, I knew I was justified. Shaking off the negative vibes, I focused on cooking pot roast. When Stephen returned home, his face mirrored his mother's anger. What'd you say to Mom? She called me crying. How could you be so cruel when she was just trying to help because you're busy? Baffled, I responded, first off, breaking into someone's home isn't a surprise. And if it is, then a burglar should be forgiven if they call it a surprise, right? This happened because you gave her a spare key. She could have come when one of us was home. It's not only unnecessary, but also intrusive. What about my privacy? I have no intention of apologizing. Stephen looked shocked and with a single word said, please. Can you two just get along? He retreated to his room without eating dinner. Hoping this dispute would make him more considerate, I endured days of minimal communication. Unable to bear the tension, I initiated a conversation saying, what do you want to do going forward? I don't want a relationship where we don't communicate. Let's talk. Finally, Stephen spoke up, saying, Mom's remorseful. She was crying yesterday, worried you would never forgive her. The root cause was me giving her the spare key. I'm sorry, Karen. I didn't care about mother-in-law as long as Stephen understood. That was enough. My weakness showed, and I forgave him, even though I knew in the back of my mind, my fault is that I forgive. Stephen promptly called his mother, who eagerly came running, visibly relieved to be summoned. Exhausted from the ongoing conflict, I harbored a bad feeling but was willing to give peace a chance. As soon as mother-in-law saw my face, it was as if a switch had been turned on. Oh, I'm so relieved. I thought Karen would never speak to me again. I know I overstepped, and I promised never to do it again. Mother-in-law began speaking in a voice as sweet as if she were addressing a cat. Despite my reservations, she pulled out a mysterious bag from her purse. I met an old friend from college yesterday. She's unbelievably youthful and beautiful. She gave me some Chinese tea. That's her beauty secret. I thought I'd share some with you, not that you need it. My instincts raised concern, but I felt awkward refusing. Stephen whispered, Just have 1 cup of tea with her. I'll make sure she leaves as soon as possible. Wanting her gone, I reluctantly agreed to the tea. I'd always enjoyed Chinese tea, and it's popular at my workplace too. Mother-in-law quickly poured hot water into the tea pack. This tea is supposed to be good for your skin and boost female hormones. You guys are thinking about having kids soon, right? If you like it, I'll tell my friend to get some for you, she said, placing the cup in front of me. The aroma was a bit unusual, but I took a sip anyway. It tasted strange, but I dismissed it, thinking it was just a new flavor. However, my bad feeling came true. I woke up in the middle of the night with stomach pain, feeling half faint. By the time I felt better, it was already morning. There was no doubt about it. The only thing I had consumed that Stephen hadn't was the suspicious Chinese tea. I told Stephen about it, but he didn't take me seriously. Karen, that's a terrible accusation. Mom brought the tea to make amends. You're making it sound like she poisoned you. Don't you feel ashamed? It's probably just an upset stomach. Mom would never do something like that. Stephen wouldn't believe that I was being malicious, but without evidence, I couldn't press the issue. Still, I have been wary of anything from mother-in-law since then. Just before Stephen's birthday, mother-in-law called. Karen, I'm cooking for Stephen's birthday. Say you can come or not, it's up to you. You're busy, right? Maybe you should take some time to refresh yourself. She was planning to celebrate Stephen's birthday without me. I hadn't dared to eat anything from her since that day, and homemade food was out of the question. But I was planning to spend Stephen's birthday together, so I felt upset. I thought we would spend his birthday together since we are newlyweds. I assume you have celebrated with him every year until now, so from now on it's my turn. Before I could complete my sentence, she abruptly interrupted me. Regardless, I insist on Stephen returning home. Karen, your presence is optional. We can defer the celebration of your birthday to next month, all right? I left the decision in Steph's hands. That nickname of hers, Steph responded, Did you catch that? You have the freedom to do whatever you please on that day. Without hesitation, he favored his mother-in-law over me, and my patience was wearing thin. On Stephen's birthday, his enthusiasm was contagious, but it left me feeling queasy. My affection for him began to dwindle. He relished celebrating exclusively with his mom, transforming into more of a mama's boy. Their dining outings became more frequent. I'm occupied with work and can't dwell on this all the time. A month flew by, and it was my birthday. Traditionally, we celebrated at our favorite restaurant. I assumed this year would follow suit, but Stephen surprised me. Mom wants to join in the celebration. She'd be happiest if the two of you could get along. I was taken aback, frozen in shock. Stephen, still exuberant, remained oblivious. I expressed, I wanted to celebrate with just you, Stephen. We spent your birthday together, so let's do the same for mine. Stephen, for some inexplicable reason, interpreted it as politeness. No need to hold back. Mom offered, so it's fine. He just couldn't grasp it. With no other option, I had to be resolute. No offense to mother-in-law, but I want to spend my birthday exclusively with you. I'd like to go to our special restaurant. Suddenly, Stephen erupted in anger. Don't reject Mom's kindness. You're heartless. Haven't you realized she didn't invite you to my birthday? Just comply with my wishes. It's already a hassle. I was done arguing. And then came my birthday. Instead of the anticipated restaurant outing, we were at home, with mother-in-law in tow. Neither of them seemed attuned to my subdued mood. My frustration escalated as I observed them enjoying themselves in the kitchen. Then the lights dimmed, and the cake made its entrance. Despite my anger, the cake provided a brief respite before I blew out the candles. Mother-in-law excitedly announced a special gift for my birthday celebration. I splurged on a $5,000 bottle of wine. Let's uncork it right away. The packaging appeared worn, and the cork crumbled at the touch. Is this what they call vintage? She pondered aloud, pouring a generous amount into my glass. Even in the subdued lighting, it was evident that the wine had an unsettling cloudiness. Recollections of the Chinese tea mishap flooded my mind as I cautiously took a small sip. What is this? I immediately spat it out, prompting me to turn on the lights. In the kitchen sink, I inverted the bottle of mother-in-law's supposedly extravagant $5,000 wine, watching as it flowed down the drain. Stephen swiftly seized the bottle from my hands, scolding me, "You're being awful." Apologized to Mom. "What do you think you're doing?" The anger etched on Stephen's face was unmistakable. Under Stephen's intense gaze, I poured some wine into the glass he was holding. "Can you drink this then?" Stephen appeared puzzled yet resolute as he took a sip. At that precise moment, mother-in-law urgently shouted, "Stephen, don't drink it." Unfortunately, it was too late. He immediately spat it out, exclaiming, "What on earth is this?" Mother-in-law, shocked, took the wine away from Stephen. He questioned Mom, "Where did you get this wine? We need to file a complaint. This is fraud. It's spoiled." Mother-in-law, looking guilty, admitted, "That wine was just sitting in the back of our kitchen. It's 50 years old. I heard on TV that it gains $1,000 in value every year. Vintage wines are supposed to be stored in wine coolers." Upon closer examination, the cork was more deteriorated than initially thought, emitting a moldy odor. Even Stephen couldn't conceal his surprise. What bothered me was mother-in-law's insistence. "Don't drink it." I suspect she knew it was spoiled, but she would never admit it. I couldn't find it in me to forgive mother-in-law for her actions. "Could you please leave? I can't control my emotions. Just go," I implored. Yet even as I spoke, mother-in-law continued to offer excuses to Stephen. I felt invisible, but even she, visibly uncomfortable, hurriedly departed. Once she was gone, Stephen surprised me with his response. "Mom doesn't drink, so she wouldn't have known." Thankfully, we didn't offer it to anyone else. Despite everything, Stephen defended mother-in-law as if it were an innocent mistake. In that moment, my feelings for him cooled. My determination against Stephen solidified as he defended mother-in-law despite her actions against me. I had ignored his excessive attachment to his mother for too long. "I want a divorce," I declared, presenting Stephen with divorce papers I had kept just in case. He was rendered speechless, questioning my decision. "Ask yourself, do you comprehend how much I've endured? I've reached my breaking point." Then, to compound matters, he offered a profound apology without prompting, stating, "I won't repeat it. You've won." He proceeded to confess to multiple affairs, revealing 4 different women. Though I had harbored suspicions of infidelity, learning the truth left me shocked. There was no longer any doubt. I was determined to divorce him. Engaging a private investigator seemed unnecessary. Evidence of his affairs was abundant. During our conversation, he foolishly remarked, "You'll regret divorcing someone as great as me." Stephen's words only fueled my disgust at myself for ever loving him. Multiple affairs and his attachment to his mother provided ample grounds for divorce. To streamline the process, I resolved to hire a lawyer, regardless of the cost. Initially resistant to the divorce, Stephen eventually relented, likely recognizing the gravity of his mistakes. He returned to his doting mother, and later it surfaced that his affair was with a co-worker, leading to his demotion. Unable to distance himself from his mother, Stephen ultimately resigned from his job. Despite his ongoing job hunt, word of his workplace indiscretions had spread rapidly, hindering his prospects in the same field. Persistently tethered to his mother, he settled for part-time work. Given his arrogant and unreliable demeanor, it seems unlikely that he will maintain the job for an extended period. While I rely on his steady employment to receive alimony, the payments are currently consistent, so I'll count that as a win. I discovered that mother-in-law, who had presented herself as superior, was in fact a hoarder. Stephen's family home turned out to be a literal dump, explaining their reluctance to have me over. As the stench became a bother to neighbors, police intervention became necessary. The mere thought of consuming wine from that house still turns my stomach. Let Stephen live in his squalid environment, and work his sporadic part-time jobs with his beloved mother-in-law for all I care. Though I've returned to my previous life, I find happiness in the absence of torment. No longer will Stephen disrupt my workplace, providing a welcome relief. In hindsight, Stephen possessed good looks but little else. The fact that he complies with alimony payments is a silver lining, I suppose. The breakup taught me a valuable lesson. Love is, indeed, blind. This time, I'm putting romance on hold to focus on my career. I've learned my lesson and am determined to prioritize my professional pursuits. Covered in blood, my high school freshman daughter, Becky, who was supposed to have gone to my husband's family home with him, returned home bleeding from her forehead. I screamed in shock, and after hastily treating her wounds, I immediately contacted my husband, Ryan. When he answered the phone, I couldn't help but yell at him, "Ryan, where are you? I told you I'm on a business trip, didn't I?" I was stunned by his unexpected reply. A while ago, I had seen him off with Becky 5 days earlier, heading to his family home. Before me stood my daughter, seriously injured. Seeing my confusion, Vicky told me a shocking truth. My name is Kathy Hansen, a 40-year-old part-time housewife. My husband, Ryan, the same age as me, is a salesman who visits various schools to sell high school teaching materials. He always says trust is important, looking so cool being diligent and proper. Maggie became a high school freshman this spring. Once a clingy child who couldn't leave my side, she's now so responsible that she cooks dinner while waiting for me to return from my part-time job. Life was peaceful with my husband and daughter, but 5 years ago, my mother became bedridden due to an internal illness. Since then, I've been busy juggling caregiving and my part-time job, unable to manage a visit to my in-laws except during the Christmas holidays. During such times, Ryan was safe, jokingly saying, "Don't overdo it. Aren't you lucky to have an understanding husband?" He would go to visit his family home alone, and though I felt terrible, I was grateful as I was overwhelmed with caring for my mother. 3 years ago, my mother-in-law passed away suddenly in an accident. My father-in-law, who was very close to her, became deeply depressed, and Ryan's visits to his family home became more frequent. Moreover, Ryan expressed his desire to take his dad on a trip to cheer him up and treat him to delicious meals with each visit. The expenses increased $300 to $500, but I couldn't complain about money as I hadn't been able to visit my in-laws myself. One day, Ryan mentioned the cost of his next visit. "I need $11,000 for my next trip home," he said. I doubted if such a large sum was really necessary for visiting back home, but he never explained the details of the expenses. It must be necessary, I thought, as a way of showing how thankful I am to my father-in-law. I convinced myself of this. However, due to the sudden expense, I had no choice but to temporarily withdraw money from the savings account I had set aside for Becky's school fees. I'll have to skip going to the beauty salon for a while and make sure not to dip into Becky's money again, I decided, beginning to save diligently and gradually returning money to Becky's account. As Becky's exams finally ended and things settled down, my father-in-law said, "I want to see my granddaughter again." "All right, I'll take Becky and Dad to eat seafood as a reward for their hard work." "Really?" "Yay." Seeing Becky's beaming smile, I stroked her head, saying, "Thank you for always being so patient." She never complained, even though she always had to endure and even helped with caring for my mother. I was filled with gratitude. Then, on the morning of their departure to visit my father-in-law, Becky said, "I'll buy some souvenirs and come back." I replied, "Have fun," and we were all smiling. Little did we know what was about to happen. 5 days after Ryan and Becky left for my in-laws, around noon, I was preparing lunch in the kitchen when I heard the front door rattle open. "Who is it?" I shouted, entering without ringing the doorbell. I was startled and headed to the entrance, only to find Becky standing there, bleeding from her forehead. What on earth happened? I let out a scream, almost in a shriek, desperately looking around for Ryan, but he was nowhere to be seen. Trembling, my eyes brought Becky inside, and I immediately called out to Ryan, "Ryan, where are you?" I'm at work. Didn't I tell you that I left for a business trip the day after taking Becky to my parents' home? I was confused, having heard nothing of this work, and more importantly, Becky had come home seriously injured. Ryan hung up quickly after saying, "She probably just fell. Don't take it too seriously. Girls her age tend to exaggerate." I couldn't possibly accept such a nonsensical story. While attending to Becky, I asked her, "Why are you injured? And did Dad leave for work?" Vicky, her face pale, kept her trembling lips sealed for a while. Then she whispered, "Dad. He pushed me." Shocked, I gently rubbed Becky's back as I listened to her story. An unbelievable truth was exposed. Ryan had been keeping secrets from us, and he had injured Becky when she discovered them. That's not all. He threatened her while she was bleeding, saying, "If you tell anyone about this, next time it won't just be an injury." Vicky had managed to escape from my in-laws' house when Ryan hesitated, and my father-in-law returned home. Fortunately, she had some money with her and was able to take the bus back home. How anxious she must have been, hiding her injury all the way here. I vowed never to forgive anyone who hurts my sweet Becky. I was angry not only at Ryan for abusing Becky, but also at the secrets he had kept. After hearing everything from Becky, I was about to call my father-in-law, ready for revenge. I was shocked to see numerous missed calls from him on my phone. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't notice the phone while I was cooking." I apologized. "No, it's fine." More importantly, I heard Becky had to rush back due to some urgent matter. "Did she arrive safely at your place?" "That's what I've been worried about, and why I called so many times," my father-in-law inquired. Hearing his words left me speechless. My husband, Ryan, had fabricated such a lie to cover up the fact that our daughter, whom he had injured, had fled back to our home. I then spilled everything to my father-in-law, who was oblivious to it all. "Becky is fine. I'm taking her to the hospital, but I can't forgive Ryan. Can you keep him at your house a bit longer?" "I want to give him a piece of my mind," I requested. My father-in-law immediately agreed, promising his cooperation. He said he would cunningly persuade Ryan to stay at their home for a while longer. In the meantime, I ran around making preparations for a confrontation with my husband. 5 days later, after completing the investigation into Ryan's secrets, I was on my way to my in-laws' house. Just as I was about to ring the doorbell, I saw Becky running up to me, out of breath. "Mom, wait for me. Didn't I tell you to wait at home? I can't just sit around. I have to confront him about what he did to me." I had planned to go into my in-laws' house alone, not wanting Becky to witness the argument between my husband and me. But it seemed Becky didn't want to just stay put. "I think I have a right to speak up too," Becky said, unyielding. Reluctantly, I agreed. I accepted her anger and decided to fight this together. We were greeted by my father-in-law, who was already aware of the plan. Entering the living room, we found Ryan, who appeared to have just woken up, lounging in his pajamas and watching TV. "Oh, weren't you supposed to be on a business trip, Ryan?" Startled by my sudden voice, Ryan jumped up. He started making lame excuses about how he was supposed to go, but then didn't need to. "Well, that doesn't matter now. What I want to know about is Vicky's injury," I stated firmly. "Oh, that clumsy her. Seems like she fell down the stairs and hit her forehead," Ryan replied. I was about to yell at my husband for feigning ignorance, but my father-in-law spoke first. "Enough. I know that Becky's injury is your fault," he said sternly. Becky chimed in, "Yeah, that's right." And I glared at Ryan, feeling cornered. Ryan started to look nervous, but then suddenly seemed to have an idea and argued back. "As if you have the right to talk. You never visited my parents, but I was the one taking care of them," Ryan said, smug and grinning, thinking I wouldn't be able to say anything. Indeed, I had kept quiet before, thinking he was right. But after hearing Becky's story, I knew Ryan's words were full of lies. "Oh, really? Leaving all the housework to your daughter and not spending time with your father is called taking care of the family?" "Yeah. Ever since you brought me here, you've been lazing around at home," I retorted, feeling the weight of frustration. Shut up. This is just a one-time thing. Usually, I'm the one working hard, Ryan snapped back. Watching Ryan boast, I pulled out my father-in-law's account of household expenses that I had previously obtained. It detailed not only the money in and out, but also how Ryan spent his time at his parents' house. Let me tell you what's written here, I began, pointing to the document. June 10th, gave Ryan $200 for transportation. He lazed around all day as usual, went out at night, and returned in the morning. Food expenses increased because of Ryan's presence. I calmly read out the details. According to this, every time Ryan visited, he lied about me not giving him transportation money and received cash from his father. Taking advantage of my absence, Ryan had painted me as a stingy, evil wife to gain sympathy from his father. How can you not be ashamed of mooching off your parents at your age and getting all sorts of help too? I questioned, feeling sorry for him initially, thinking he didn't have any money and tried to help out. All that was a lie too. Cornered by our accusations, Ryan fell silent at a loss for words. What have you been using all that money for, I wonder? Well, no need to say anything. You're probably just thinking of another pathetic lie. Ignoring Ryan's mumbling, I presented a photo in front of him. You needed so much money because you were splurging at places like this, right? How do you know about this place? Surprised that I knew about it, the color drained from his face. The secret that Becky had discovered while Ryan was visiting his parents was this. She thought Ryan was diligently caring for his father, but he was actually going out at night and returning in the morning. Suspicious, she secretly investigated and installed an app on his phone to track his location. After he left, she checked his whereabouts on a computer, always finding him at the same place. Researching online, Becky found out it was a gentleman's club. Shocked, she was about to call me when Ryan returned home. He found her researching the location and the club on the computer, and in a fit of rage, pushed her. Becky hit her head on the corner of a dresser, causing the bleeding, and the rest is as you know. After hearing Becky's story, I left my mother in the care of professionals for a few days and went to the club to gather evidence of Ryan's wasteful spending. The shock I felt seeing my husband cheerfully entering the club. The money for this visit, even if temporary, was taken from Becky's school fund, and he used it. Dad, you're the worst, I said, presenting undeniable evidence. Ryan, cornered by the evidence, muttered weakly, "Isn't this normal for men?" and looked up at his father for support. What are you talking about? Using your child's school money for your satisfaction is inexcusable for any man. I'm tired from work. Isn't it okay to have a little fun? Vicky sighed in exasperation at Ryan's stubbornness. Mom, do you know what kind of place that is? Huh? Oh no, I just took the photo and left immediately. I thought so. Here, take this, Vicky said, laying out several printed pages of the club's website on the table. Looking over them with my father-in-law, we saw that the outfits worn by the girls at the club were school uniforms. They all seemed to be adults, but it was a gentleman's club where they cosplayed in revealing school uniforms. Seeing this, I thought to myself, exposing my daughter of this age to such a world. I was filled with anger, but Becky seemed unfazed. So, Dad, you like this kind of stuff, huh? Gross, she commented, handing the papers to Ryan with a shudder, as if the idea was repulsive. Well, you don't have to say it like that, you know. If your clients at the schools found out about your love for girls with uniforms, it could be a big problem, right? I doubt your company, which sells educational materials to schools, would want to keep an employee with such hobbies, I said with an icy stare. Ryan turned pale. I quickly grabbed Ryan's schedule book, which was left in his business bag, and found it easily. Looking at this now, I know all the schools you've been visiting. Maybe I should inform your clients about your wonderful hobby. Please spare me that. I'm sorry. I went too far. I'll change my ways from now on. Realizing he couldn't escape, Ryan started trembling and knelt down. He apologized profusely. But years of frequenting those clubs, wasting money, not to mention injuring our daughter, were not forgivable. Who would believe a liar like you? I thought. Dad, I've consulted with a lawyer, and I'm ready to proceed with a divorce. I'll make sure you pay back all the money you squandered on your indulgences, plus compensation. This is the end for us. Ryan tried to cling to Becky, but she dodged him, saying, "You gross." Eventually, he broke down crying, and we glared at him coldly. Soon after the divorce was finalized, and I demanded from Ryan the $115,000 he had squandered and $30,000 in compensation. Word of his club visits leaked to his company. Ryan was fired, and even his father cut ties with him. Now he lives alone in a rundown house, barely making ends meet with day-to-day jobs. Unable to afford the compensation payments, he ended up borrowing money from shady lenders and now lives in fear of debt collectors. Meanwhile, I have found more time to myself after the divorce. With Becky's help, my mother's health improved significantly, and she no longer needs care. Now, the three of us women are enjoying a happy and harmonious life. Unlock this door. Have you lost your mind? They're probably saying that on the other side of this thick door, but I can't hear them, and frankly, I don't need their forgiveness. Facing the three flustered fools on the other side, I waved with a smile and said, "Let's go. Wonder if you can make it back safely. Good luck." My name is Leah, a 30-year-old officer worker. I'm a newlywed, married for just a year with no kids yet. Back when I was single, my hobby was taking day trips using the train on my days off. Friends would ask, "Don't you get lonely traveling alone?" But I found it surprisingly pleasant to move at my own pace without a fixed schedule. There's a bit of loneliness, but the fun outweighs it. I have a favorite travel magazine, and sometimes I plan trips based on it. As I went about my days, I noticed something. Hug, isn't that the same guy I saw last week? It seemed coincidental, but after the third time, I might have thought it was fate if I were romantic. Instead, I just felt a bit scared, but it turned out he felt the same. Sorry if I'm mistaken, but didn't we meet last week and the week before at completely different places? He approached me with a slightly scared look. Wait, do you think I'm following you? To clear up the misunderstanding, I opened my travel magazine and confidently said, "I'm just traveling based on this magazine." Surprised, he responded, "Me too," and opened the same magazine, smiling happily. That's how I met my husband, Henry. He turned out to be a really interesting guy. Being cautious by nature, I always end up carrying a lot of stuff, but he said, "I always travel light so I can move easily. Nowadays, with cashless payments, you hardly need cash. A mobile phone is enough." He laughed joyfully. Talking with someone with such different values was very stimulating. We hit it off, discussing our favorite travel destinations and exchanged contacts. Though we both liked solo trips, we started going out together more often. Surprisingly, I enjoyed sharing memories with someone else, and I found that local food tastes even better when shared. One day, after about 6 months, Henry asked me to go out. I didn't feel bad at all. In fact, I felt the same way and remember being very happy. We decided to get married 6 months into our relationship. I thought our happy newlywed life was just beginning, but my expectations quickly shattered due to Henry's parents, Jack and Aaliyah. Their house is about a 30-minute drive from ours. They are still in their 50s, with Aaliyah working part-time, and both of them are employed. Initially, they used to visit our house, but lately, we've managed to maintain a reasonable distance. However, an incident occurred that disrupted this balance. "Hey, Henry, let's go here on our next day off." I agree, sounds good. Our post-marriage tradition of many trips to tourist spots continued as usual. Minimalist Henry recently reduced his belongings to just a mobile phone, even entrusting his wallet to me. It feels so light. I don't look like someone who's about to go out at all, do I? He said with a contented smile. I thought to myself, at least carry your own wallet. But it wasn't really a bother. It was an ordinary conversation, but that day was different. Oh, by the way, Dad and Mom's wedding anniversary is coming up soon. How about we invite my parents on our next trip? Henry's sudden suggestion made me tense up. Of course, there was a reason for that, but I couldn't just say no. So I responded, yeah, that sounds good. We haven't seen Aliyah and Jack recently anyway. Unaware of my slightly strained face, Henry didn't notice a thing. The next day, they were really looking forward to it. When I called, he told me, I guess I have to give it my best shot. So I steeled myself. Honestly, I'm not comfortable around my parents-in-law. They're not bad people, we're just not a good fit. I'm more on the reserved side, not fond of noisy places, and this applies to people too. Talking to high-energy people can be mentally exhausting for me. Speaking of my parents-in-law, they are incredibly cheerful. When I first met them, their exuberance overwhelmed me. Nice to meet you. I'm Henry's mom, and I'm the dad. They announced loudly, like comedians, making me stiffen up involuntarily. That time, the four of us, including Henry and his parents, went out to eat, and they chose the restaurant. I wondered if it's their favorite place, but when we got there, it was an all-you-can-eat buffet. Meeting their son's girlfriend for the first time at such a casual place made me laugh. We're so nervous today. We haven't eaten anything since morning, Aliyah, who didn't seem nervous at all, said cheerfully to me. That's right, that's right. Plus, we have to get our money's worth. The true reason for skipping breakfast was quickly revealed by Jack. Their loud voices attracted quiet laughter from nearby tables. Embarrassed by then and wanting to go home, looking sideways, thinking Henry must feel the same, I was surprised to find he wasn't there. He had gone to get food. Not to be outdone, the parents-in-law also got up, piling their plates with food. Are they planning to hibernate after eating so much? Can I really become part of this family? I managed only a forced smile at their overwhelming presence. I barely ate that day, nervous as I was, feeling uncertain about the future with Henry. I was touched when they said at parting, "What a wonderful girlfriend Henry has. He may be awkward, but please take care of Henry from now on, Leah." I was simply happy to hear that. I loved him too, and I thought the parents-in-law weren't bad at heart. So, when he proposed a few months later, I faced no hesitation, but it turns out I'm not adept at judging people. At our wedding, the bridegroom's parents, my parents-in-law, completely disregarded the ceremony and focused solely on eating, leaving my own parents utterly disillusioned. Henry has a brother, Jonathan, who seemed to be the only sensible one. I'm sorry my parents showed such an embarrassing side. It's really shameful. Jonathan came to greet us politely. As I heard from my parents, Jonathan, who lives alone, seems to have a strained relationship with his parents. It appears the feeling is mutual, as they once complained. That boy is always so noisy with his complaints. Just the other day, he bragged about buying several eggs when it was limited to one per person, and I scolded him for it. Seemingly annoyed, he replied, "Don't you feel guilty about benefiting yourself at the expense of others?" Hearing this story, I thought to myself, isn't that a fair point? What's wrong with that, Aliyah? I honestly felt that way when the parents-in-law came to visit our new home. They arrived empty-handed, which wasn't a problem. But then they started rummaging through our shelves, exclaiming, "Isn't this the snack they're advertising on TV? I've been wanting to try it. Oh, and this one too." They foraged through my hidden snacks like they were on a treasure hunt. Even though I bought those snacks, Henry, without any malice, said, "If you want them, take them home. That's fine, right, Leah?" I wanted to smack him right then and there. All I could do was respond with a forced smile. I had a suspicion, but it was clear now. The parents-in-law were moochers. I want this, I want that, give me, give me. In the early days of our marriage, they came over every week, sensing an opportunity, and I was almost driven to neurosis. Hey, don't you think there's something off about Aliyah and Jack? They're kind of annoying. My anger exploded, and I ended up fighting with Henry. Despite how angry I was, Henry looked puzzled and said, "No, not really. Is it that strange? They've been like that since I was a kid. Don't worry about it," he said, patting my shoulder lightly, which made me furious. "Are you kidding me? If this keeps up, I'll divorce you." Just do whatever you want. My raised voice seemed to alarm Henry, and he quickly put an end to the parents-in-law's invasions. I don't know what Henry said to them, but since then, we've been living peacefully. However, the thought of traveling with the parents-in-law naturally made me anxious on the day of the trip. I was taken aback to see them waiting. It's been a while, Lee. I heard you've been busy with work. Must be tough. Alia spoke to me, but I was far from calm. The reason lay in the appearance of the parents-in-law. Alia and Jack, where's your luggage? Looking closely, Alia and Jack had brought nothing with them, even for a day trip. Isn't it normal to bring at least a bag? We wanted to be ready to move quickly, and I have a sore shoulder. Their response echoed something I'd heard before, and it was baffling. The rest of the trip went as badly as I feared. It was soon revealed that the parents-in-law had forgotten their wallets. Feigning ignorance, they said, "That's strange, isn't it?" Watching them play dumb, I thought, maybe it's better to just call off this trip or even cancel it. Yeah, unfortunately, my feelings weren't understood, Henry, looking exasperated, said again, "My folks have always been like this. I'll cover for them, but make sure they pay me back." It seemed the trip would continue as the parents-in-law laughed and apologized. All I felt was disgust. Even after we arrived at our destination, the parents-in-law's rudeness didn't stop. They complained to the store staff. "Isn't there any free tasting? Wow, stingy, huh?" When I, feeling thirsty, bought a drink and hadn't even taken a sip yet, Alia said, "Can I have a sip of that? I'm thirsty too. I can't believe I forgot my wallet, huh?" While I forced a smile, an exasperated Henry intervened. "Stop it. It's embarrassing. Look, I'll buy you one." Overhearing this, Jack muttered under his breath, referring to me. What a stingy woman, lacking compassion. I didn't miss his comment. I could say the same to you. I should have left at that point, but I was a bit stubborn. A similar incident happened twice more afterward. Apparently, the first trip was so enjoyable that Alia contacted Henry for another. When I saw them on the station platform, I couldn't help but feel chills. The second time they brought their wallets, but when the moment came, oh no, this is the wallet I used before. I rushed out in such a hurry. Their obvious lie was something only Henry would believe. And on the third trip, they forgot their wallets again. By then, it was clear it was a deliberate act. Alia, excuse me, but did you deliberately forget your wallet? You never intended to pay, did you? I hit the nail on the head, and her face turned red. Hey, what a rude woman you are. Apologize to Alia. Jack glared at me, demanding an apology. No way. I've thought this for a long time. Both of you are just too greedy. Caught in the argument with the parents-in-law, Henry seemed at a loss. Tourists around us watched curiously, noticing their gaze. Henry seemed to feel ashamed and finally said, "Stop it, please," breaking down crying. I felt truly disillusioned, but the parents-in-law reacted differently. Rushing to a crying Henry, Alia said, "I'm sorry, Henry. It was my fault." "You're so kind to cry for me," with Jack quietly standing beside her. I didn't know how to react to this farce. Only one thought came to mind. Yeah, this is impossible. Let's get a divorce. That was all I could think, seeing Henry's tears. The parents-in-law seemed to lose their fighting spirit. "Leah, we know we're often in the wrong. It's Henry's money. But still, we've taken advantage of him. It's Henry's money after all." I don't know why they said it twice, but their words, dripping with sarcasm, showed no real remorse. And so, it was confirmed that they had deliberately forgotten their wallets. Alia referred to it as Henry's money, but we both work, and his salary is only slightly higher than mine. Our actual incomes are not much different. Recently, every trip with the parents-in-law ended with, "I want to buy this too. Maybe some gifts for the neighbors as well. What's that? Looks tasty. Hey, Henry, buy that for me." Because of their endless demands, Henry's credit card bills were shockingly high. We've been living mostly on my salary for the past few months. At the time of marriage, I considered it family money and believed in spending within the limits of our allowance for personal desires. Don't be a burden to your partner. The thing that infuriated me the most was when cashless reliant Henry exclaimed at our travel destination, "What, only cash here?" He called me over, pulled his wallet out of my bag. It only had a few dollars in coins. "No," I messed up. "You know I don't carry cash, right?" he said without malice. It still makes me furious thinking about it. For the record, I always paid for my own things, yet the parents-in-law probably thought I was living off Henry's money and just complaining. We split living expenses, so such accusations were nothing but unpleasant. Thinking all this, I coldly watched Henry crying and Jack consoling him. After a moment of thought, I said, "I was wrong too. Sorry for being presumptuous. You guys go ahead on the train. I'll buy some drinks and follow." I smiled calmly, and Henry and the parents-in-law happily boarded the train. Their smiles turned to panic a few minutes later when I didn't return. Henry must have felt something was off as he messaged me, "Leah, are you coming? The train is about to leave." Right then, the heavy doors slowly closed from the platform. I had a clear view of Henry's panicked face. It seemed he noticed me and was shouting something. I was replying to his earlier message, "I'm divorcing you. If your parents are so important, live happily with them. Goodbye." I ignored his calls, thinking, doesn't he care about being a nuisance on the train? Tease. He sent several messages afterward, but I ignored them all. Henry's face through the door slowly turned to anger. "Hey, open this door. Are you crazy?" "I won't forgive you," he said, as if I needed his permission. The parents-in-law seemed to be yelling too, but of course, I couldn't hear them. Smiling at the three fools, I said, "Let's go. Wonder if you'll make it back safely. Good luck." The train quietly departed, quickly disappearing from sight. That train won't stop for a while. Walking back would be quite a challenge. After watching the train leave, I hurried home to pack my bags and left. I stayed with a friend I'd been discussing divorce with. Henry's barrage of messages continued until they suddenly stopped. His phone must have died. He often forgot to charge it before bed, and it was only at 20% this morning. Portable battery chargers are essential. That was Henry's mantra. But his crucial portable battery charger was in my bag, along with his wallet. I left all the belongings he entrusted to me at home. He must be panicking by now, but that's not my concern. While planning my next steps with my friend, my mobile phone rang. The caller was unexpected. Jonathan, Henry's brother. "Leah, I'm sorry. Did something happen?" According to Jonathan, Henry's phone had run out of battery, and in his panic, he dropped it, shattering the screen. Unable to reach me, the desperate parents-in-law could only think of one person to call. So I got contacted, but all I got was, "Ask Leah for the reason." He seemed unwilling to say more. I told Jonathan everything about Henry and the parents-in-law without holding back. As I spoke, I could hear Jonathan's voice getting sharper over the phone from the other end. "Leah's making a fool of us. Tell her off, Jonathan." The in-laws were loudly insisting that Jonathan, with his way with words, would outtalk me. After I finished explaining, Jonathan snapped, "Hey, you scoundrel. Are you stupid? What, you scoundrel?" I had heard from Aliyah that when Jonathan gets really angry, he becomes intimidating with a high-handed tone. And since Jonathan only speaks sense, Henry and the parents-in-law can't retort when he gets like that. I could hear the in-laws arguing in the background, but I quietly hung up the phone. Henry was not content with the divorce. But after I conveyed through a lawyer that I wanted to divorce without any further contact, he reluctantly agreed, accompanied by Jonathan. Later, Jonathan told me that the parents-in-law had always been terrible moochers, disliked by neighbors and even school associates. When Henry returned to the ex-in-law's house, he quickly became the talk of the neighborhood, and now all three hardly ever go out. Henry's colleagues, not knowing what to say about the quick divorce, were treating him like a delicate subject. "I'm glad to cut ties with them after this incident," Jonathan told me with a laugh. The parents-in-law were known at the local supermarket for their outrageous behavior. "This is expiring soon, so give me a discount. It's a little damaged, so I'll take it for free." Jonathan expressed his long-standing embarrassment and disdain for his parents' behavior. Recently, Henry has been seen joining them, reflecting their blood connection. It turned out the parents-in-law were both gambling addicts, often skimping on food expenses, which explained their constant hunger and lack of money. When asked about the reason for my divorce, I can only say it was a difference in values. If anyone can tolerate such behavior, they must be incredibly broad-minded. It was just too much for me. I've continued working and even started a side job as a web writer after my travel blog caught a publisher's attention. I still travel, combining it with writing assignments. Solo travel seems to suit me best. Last month, I earned a decent income from writing, so I'm planning to take a vacation to a resort somewhere far for relaxation. I'm still only 30 years old. Life is just beginning. Starting tomorrow. Please refrain from coming in. The manager, the boss's daughter, briskly informed me the moment I stepped into the office. Her disdain for me was palpable, though the extent of it caught me off guard. Stunned, I resolved to comply with her directive. Days passed, each one marked by the manager's relentless antagonism towards me. Assigned to the planning department, a position I had eagerly sought since joining the company, I devoted myself diligently to my tasks, yet my efforts were constantly undermined by the manager, who, being the president's daughter, wielded unchecked authority. One morning, summoned by the manager, I found myself subjected to her condescending scrutiny. "Do you even know why you're here?" she sneered. Her contempt for my alma mater, repeatedly dismissed as low-ranking, permeated her every word. The sense of alienation among my colleagues compounded my discomfort. "Effective immediately, your presence here is no longer required," she declared, her tone dripping with disdain. Her entourage echoed her derision, amplifying my humiliation. "Am I being fired?" I ventured, my voice betraying a mix of disbelief and resignation. The manager's response, laced with arrogance, left no room for doubt. Resigned to my fate, I swiftly completed the necessary resignation formalities. Months later, settled into a new role at a different company, I was inundated with pleas from my former employer to return. The president's desperation contrasted starkly with the manager's callous indifference. Reluctantly, I reached out to the president, who implored me to reconsider. Despite his earnestness, I couldn't overlook the systemic injustice I had endured. The company's pleas fell on deaf ears as I resolved to forge ahead without looking back. "I am no longer associated with that company," I asserted, my intention to end the call evident. "We can sort this out if we talk. I'll bring my daughter along next time so we can discuss this." The president countered before I disconnected without a reply. I intended to call back later. Upon arriving at work, I was informed of visitors. Doubtful, I made my way to the reception room, only to find the former company's president and the manager waiting. "You really came, and how do you know I'm working at this company?" I questioned, surprised. "The company I currently work for is a rival of my previous one." "Hey, Ben, I used my connections to find you." "For now, just take a seat," the president insisted. Reluctantly, I complied, meeting the manager's gaze, wondering if she had truly come to apologize. Suddenly, she slammed her hand on the table. "This makes no sense. Why should I have to come all this way for someone like him?" she exclaimed, her tone accusatory. "Excuse me, if you want to talk, you should be the one coming to me," she continued, her agitation palpable. Far from apologizing, she was yelling at me. "I don't really have anything to say," she ranted. "It's ridiculous to quit just because you got a little scolded at work." "Quit because I was scolded? What do you mean?" "I gave advice on your plan, but you didn't want to take it, so you quit." "That's not how a professional behaves," she insisted, her words bewildering. I couldn't comprehend what the manager was saying. "That's not how it happened." "I was suddenly told not to come to the company," I interjected, trying to clarify. "You think just because I'm the president's daughter, I got my position through connections, and you don't want to take advice from me," she continued, unfazed by my explanation. The manager kept spouting nonsense without caring about what I had to say. "Wait, that's not true. You never even looked at my plans. I retorted, frustration mounting. Dad, I've been enduring until now, but I can't anymore. He always looked down on me because I'm a woman, she accused, her tone laden with resentment. Got mad for a little scolding, saying that the manager ignored my words, acting as if she sought comfort from the president. My daughter was treated like that. None of that is true. So you're saying her crying is a lie? The president interjected, disappointment evident in his voice. I'm disappointed, Ben. I didn't think you were that kind of person, he added, his words piercing. Moreover, it's outrageous to get re-employed by a rival company. The manager concluded, her disdain palpable. I truly wanted to continue working in the same field. That's why I made the difficult decision to join this company. That was the truth. Even after joining the planning department I aspired for, I was completely ignored by the manager and never got the chance to prove my capabilities. However, I couldn't bring myself to leave this industry, and my current company welcomed me. You must have sold our company's information to get this job, right? Why else would they hire someone as incompetent as you? The manager accused. I did no such thing. I've maintained confidentiality, and this company never asked me for any information. People can say anything. In fact, our company has. Stop. Don't say another word, the president hastily interrupted, signaling to the manager to halt. Was she about to say something they didn't want me to hear? Such a useless person. This company should fire him. A low-ranked individual only brings shame. If Ben apologizes, I might consider taking him back. I'll even reassign him to the planning department if he wishes. For now, we don't need someone like him. Just bear with it and continue as usual. We'll manage. Then, I want a raise. The two of them continued discussing without any regard for my opinion. Despite my repeated expressions of unwillingness to return, I was being told to apologize and be forgiven. The frustration of being treated like a fool left me trembling. The manager noticed and sneered. Are you crying with joy? It figures. Low-ranked individuals really can't help themselves. You really are a kind soul, aren't you? She mocked. Sure, I am. Taking someone like him back is nothing short of generous. Just make sure you don't irritate me too much. Make sure you listen to your boss, okay? I have no intention of leaving this company, I asserted. You still don't get it. I'm offering to take care of you before you get fired for incompetence. You really are clueless. That's the way it is. But don't quit over a little scolding this time, the president added dismissively. The mocking continued. Saying that, the president and the manager mocked me. Mr. President, if I may be so bold, the manager is lying. I spoke up, desperate. After all we've been saying, you're taking this attitude. I'm not lying. That's quite the accusation. Do you have any evidence to back that up? Yes, I prepared this just in case, I said and took a voice recorder out of my bag. I had recorded not only the day the manager told me to leave, but also any other occasions when she had said something unreasonable. You've been recording me? Unbelievable. At the sight of the voice recorder, the manager visibly panicked. Dad, we don't need to listen to this. Let's just go. Then I'll play it. I played the recording, making sure the manager, who was attempting to leave, could hear it. The recording unmistakably captured the manager's voice instructing me not to come to the company. What's the meaning of this? My daughter was lying. It's a lie, the president explained. Undeterred, I went on to reveal all the unfair treatment I had endured from the manager. The recording included the sound of my proposal being torn up, the manager and her aunt bad-mouthing me during work hours, and the crucial exchange where I asked why my proposals were never reviewed. Her reply stung. They're from a low-ranked individual like you. Your ideas are as expected. It was undeniable proof that the manager had been lying. By the way, this is the proposal that the manager tore up, I said, handing a freshly printed proposal to the president. He took it, visibly shaken, and started reading. No way. It's the plan for the hit product this company is currently selling, he explained. This project was one I had poured my heart and soul into, hoping for the manager's approval, but all my efforts had been in vain. The proposal was torn up without even being read. Why did you reject this proposal? You didn't even look at it, I demanded. The manager shrugged it off. Well, his proposals were always so pathetic. I thought there was no need to read them. It's his fault for always behaving badly. I wasn't satisfied and handed another set of documents to the president. Most of them were products developed since I moved to my current company, so it's all true, I explained. These were Ben's plans, the president confirmed. Yes, I worked hard, hoping to be recognized by the manager, but not once did she look at my proposals. I questioned the manager's actions, bewildered by the disregard for my efforts. I'm not the one at fault here, the manager retorted. The president, regaining his composure, addressed the potential copyright violation. Wait, these plans were all developed by this company, right? That's a violation of copyright law. What are you going to do about that? Indeed, if we sue, we'll win, right? He challenged. The president, who had been flustered until then, suddenly seemed to regain his composure and retorted. The manager looked at me as if to say she'd gotten the upper hand. Manager, don't you remember? When I left, you promised to transfer all the copyrights of my projects to me, didn't you? I confronted her. I never said that. I don't remember, she denied. Unfazed, I presented evidence. You're probably going to say you recorded it, right? What's the point of such verbal agreement? No, it's not just that. I got it in writing with your signature. I said that. I began, presenting a piece of paper to the manager. It clearly stated that the copyrights belonged to me, acknowledged and signed by her. What? I don't remember signing this. The manager seemed flustered upon seeing the document. When I submitted my resignation paperwork, I included this document and got your signature on all the papers. That's sneaky. Making me sign something hidden, I accused. If it wasn't hidden, didn't you even read the documents you were signing? I pressed. The manager's face turned pale. Oh no, this document states I hold all the copyrights. I understand. It seems my daughter was really in the wrong, the president interjected, casting a disapproving glance at the manager. Dad, don't say such terrible things. Shut up. Do you have any idea how much profit you've cost us? The manager retorted. Ignoring her outburst, the president turned to me. Ben, won't you please consider coming back to our company? I promise to offer you a higher position than before, one better than your current company can provide. What about me then? You were not ready for the manager position. Start from the beginning again. The president's words made the manager crumble. But such things no longer mattered to me. The president was desperately trying to win me over. So, what do you say? Have you changed your mind about returning? There's no one left to give you a hard time anymore, you know, the president urged, his eyes gleaming. Wanting to leave the situation, I asked him a question. There's something I want to ask. Sure, ask me anything, the president replied eagerly. It hasn't been long since I left your company, so why are you so desperate to bring me back now? I questioned. The president's voice suddenly faded, and he began to make excuses. We've been very busy recently. I thought about addressing it sooner, but I couldn't find the time. Sorry, he stumbled over his words. I didn't miss the president's eyes darting around as he made excuses. Is that so? Because it seemed like you were mostly playing golf when I was working there, I remarked pointedly. That was necessary for business networking. If you want, I can take you with me from now on, the president offered. No, that's all right. Feel free to reach out anytime, I declined. You're going to be our star player from now on, the president continued, talking as if my return to the company was a foregone conclusion, though he was making concessions. The pressure of not going against the president weighed heavily on me. There must be a reason you want me back in the company so badly. Reason. It's nothing grand. I just want to make things right for you, especially since my daughter caused you trouble. The president smoothly dodged the issue, but I could see through his facade. The president's real motive was clear, rendering this all a futile effort. Our company's performance had been growing, while his company had started to stagnate right after I joined. The products I planned hit the market successfully, skyrocketing sales and rapidly increasing the company's reputation. I even got interviewed on TV as the planner. Compared to this thriving company, the president's company's performance had been lackluster. Being a traditional company, it failed to incorporate anything new and lacked buzz. Once seen as rivals, the difference between the two companies was now like night and day. Did you see me on TV? Is that why you hastily contacted me? Well, what was it again? Didn't you realize I had left or that your company's performance wasn't growing until you saw me on TV? I had a lot I wanted to say. Why did he ignore the harassment I was receiving? Why didn't he inquire when I had to leave abruptly for an unreasonable reason? But conveying that to the president now meant nothing. There's no need for me to be involved anymore, I stated firmly. Did you think I was unaware of everything? You're a spiteful person. Yes, our company is in a pinch. If you know that, come back quickly. The president's tone turned accusatory. I have no intention of leaving this company, I affirmed. Are you defying me? I was the one who transferred you, a low-ranked college graduate, to the planning department. Are you repaying my kindness with betrayal? The president's words stung, but I remained resolute. I am grateful for being placed in the planning department and offered many ideas and response. However, it was the president's kin who refused to accept them. How dare you speak to me like that? As the president raised his voice, the door to the reception room swung open. Ben has been of great service to us, boss. We're in the middle of something. I can't have you entering unannounced. With all due respect, it's also a nuance for our company when you come without an appointment. Occupy the reception room and tie up our valuable employee. A person of your level shouldn't be so arrogant. Who do you think I am? I spoke firmly to the newcomer. My apologies. May I offer you my business card? My boss presented a business card to the president. The president snatched it, and his face turned pale as he read it. My father is busy, so I came in his stead. I will be serving as the CEO from next year. My boss, like the manager, was the son of the company's president and an extremely capable person set to become the new president next year. I had no idea. No problem. We're grateful for the talented individual you've provided us. The president bowed, and I felt a sense of puzzlement as to why he seemed so anxious. However, we will have to decline the collaboration project you proposed recently, my boss announced. What? You said you considered it to help our company, the president exclaimed. I did consider it. Even though it's a rival company, seeing a traditional manufacturer falter doesn't feel right. Then why? The president questioned, only to be interrupted. Seeing the character of you and your daughter, I couldn't bring myself to support you. Please reconsider, my boss explained. The president desperately apologized, and the manager seemed to finally realize the gravity of the situation. Please help me out here. I'm sorry, the manager pleaded. It's my boss's decision. There's nothing I can do, my boss replied firmly. After that, the president and the manager were escorted out by security guards. Ben, I believe in you. I'll be waiting, the president shouted as he left. I just watched him go. Later, I heard that the manager's company's performance continued to plummet, making management difficult. The calls kept coming after that day, so I changed my phone number. Meanwhile, the company I work for continues to grow rapidly. I want to keep working here for the foreseeable future. The move is finally complete, yet Charles, my father-in-law, utters his disdain without bothering to address me by name. His usual arrogance is unmistakable, and though he doesn't explicitly call me out, it's evident he's directing his words at me. I've endured his attitude until now, but I've reached my limit. As I pause from wiping the table, I shoot a defiant glare at Charles, who doesn't even bother to meet my gaze. I'll be out by today, I declare, and Charles responds with a mocking laugh, reveling in his satisfaction. His words cut deep, branding me as a mere parasite and trash. He envisions a life refreshed once I'm gone, oblivious to the profound changes his own lifestyle has undergone over the years. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Grace, and I recently turned 40. I'm married to William and currently residing with my in-laws. Despite several years of marriage, we remain childless, and there's no intention or possibility of having children. The harsh truth about William's infertility surfaced shortly after our marriage registration. Had I known from the start, I might have reconsidered our union. The revelation struck me like a pit of despair. All our dreams of building a happy family together were shattered. William, with apparent sincerity, had discussed our future children, even contributing to naming them. Little did I know, it was all a facade, a betrayal concealed beneath the guise of a promising future. Despite the profound disappointment, divorce wasn't a simple option for me. We had committed to being a family with the in-laws, who we considered our parents. Reporting a divorce a day after joining the family felt like a breach of trust. Living with the in-laws only intensified the inevitable question of when we would have children. Upon revealing our infertility, the in-laws reacted with fury. To them, a woman unable to bear children was deemed useless and deserving of immediate expulsion. Charles, my father-in-law, took the lead in treating me as a servant, stripping away any semblance of dignity. In their house, I was perpetually relegated to eating alone in the kitchen. I became part of the leftover disposal crew once the in-laws and William had finished their meals. No matter how much effort I put into cooking delicious food, all I received were the scraps left behind by them. Since getting married, I hadn't enjoyed a single satisfying meal. My weight steadily dropped, and within 6 months of marriage, my wrist bones were protruding. Initially, mother-in-law Madison bore the brunt of Charles's tirades, but once I joined the family, his focus shifted to me. Madison seemed relieved by the change. She smiled more often. William once remarked that she felt relieved not to be Charles' target anymore. Despite never smiling around Charles, Madison's demeanor improved in his absence. Charles's tyranny extended beyond targeting me. Upon learning of our infertility, he commanded me to work from dawn to dusk, deeming me lacking as a woman. I had always intended to work after marriage and had no desire to prolong my stay in their house unnecessarily. Balancing early morning chores, seeing everyone off, and heading to work proved challenging, but having a job with flexible hours helped. Despite my efforts, Charles discarded my food without tasting it, citing its appearance as the reason. Neither William nor Madison complained, choosing instead to remain silent. Despite my grievances, conversations during meals were sparse, and I often wondered if they truly enjoyed eating in silence. I had no choice but to maintain a facade of harmony with the in-laws, playing the role of a dutiful wife. As someone without parents, the weight of divorce seemed unbearable. However, Charles's demand that I contribute all my earnings to the household expenses crossed the line. While I intended to contribute, his insistence on full control over my earnings felt absurd. Protesting was futile. Charles's decisions were absolute. It seemed easier to comply, appeasing him and sparing myself the sight of Madison and William's saddened expressions. The root of the marital issues lay with Charles, whose oppression and torment overshadowed everything else. While Madison used to manage the household finances, the responsibility fell on me after marriage, a task I found overwhelming. "Isn't this too much for Grace?" Madison dared to question, only to be silenced by Charles's authoritative command to shut up. I have been dismissed in Charles's eyes, and Madison and I, as women, were deemed worthless, stripped of the privilege to voice our opinions. Taking over the household ledger from Madison initially shocked me, but after several years, I grew accustomed to it. Perhaps the acceptance stemmed from having an additional breadwinner in the house. Charles, however, began spending more recklessly, justifying it as work-related expenses, increasing his nights out, and embarking on trips with Madison and William, excluding me. This sudden change in their behavior marked a departure from the past. Despite the years that had passed, Charles continued to treat me as an outsider, labeling me a parasite or trash. In my younger years, I endured the peace that came when Charles wasn't home, not minding my role as a mere housekeeper. However, as I approached 40, I found his behavior intolerable. The fear that once kept me silent waned, and I started speaking up. Charles didn't appreciate my newfound assertiveness, leading to resentment and a worsening negative loop. Our strained relationship reached a point where Charles constantly badmouthed me, and our interactions were minimal. Whenever he spoke, it was to insult me, creating a dreadful atmosphere at home. Despite the escalating tension, I refused to comply when Charles demanded I leave the house. I snapped back, questioning where I could go knowing I had no parents. Charles, fueled by anger, slammed glasses onto the table, breaking them in the process. Tired of enduring the constant yelling, I deviated from my usual apology and spoke sharply to Charles. I pointed out that he should calm down in his older age. Unaccustomed to such defiance, Charles became furious, asserting his dominance as the master of the house, declaring that a wife like me shouldn't have opinions. Frustration reached its peak, and I confronted Charles head-on, expressing my years-long desire to be treated like a human. He retaliated, escalating to grabbing me by the collar and vehemently declaring that a person like me wasn't needed in his house. The force of his words was enough to shake the furniture, and in that moment, I was pushed away. I should have offered an apology right then and there, but I could no longer contain my frustration. "Fine, you want me to leave. That'll make you happy, right, Charles?" I looked up at him, unable to stay silent any longer. "Yes," he spat out, condescendingly looking down on me. "Then I'll do it," I declared. He stormed off to his room with a loud noise, and I, now a bit calmer, started cleaning the living room that Charles had dirtied. Madison came to check on me with a worried look, but she left without saying anything, returning to her room. I felt like I had no place in this house anymore. Neither William nor Madison would protect me, and years of endurance exploded, making me feel even more isolated. The next day, as usual, I got up early and began my routine. Charles woke up and entered the living room, sitting on the sofa, leaning back, and spreading the newspaper without even glancing at me. Then, without looking up, he asked, "Finished moving yet?" There was no way I could have moved out so soon after yesterday's events. I didn't even think he was serious. I thought it was just a drunken outburst, not something he meant. This was about leaving the house, right? "When will you leave? You have no right to live here anymore," Charles said, still not looking at me. I stopped wiping the table and turned to face him. If he was serious about wanting me to leave, then I would respond seriously. "I'll be out by today," I declared. Madison, who was listening nearby, froze, her worried gaze falling on me. It was clear that once I left, Charles would target Madison again, and she didn't want me to go. However, Charles insisted on my departure, and I had no other option. Charles laughed loudly, likely satisfied that he was getting his way. I rushed out of the living room, quickly packed my things, and left the in-laws' house. I hadn't decided where to go, but I felt liberated. I sent a message to William, who was already out, asking him to divorce me. A lawyer would contact him, and then I turned off my phone. Over the next few days, I found a lawyer and had them contact William and the in-laws. Charles, thinking divorce was inevitable, pressured William into signing the papers quickly. Despite William's reluctance, he signed the agreement under Charles's glare. I signed in front of the lawyer, and the divorce was finalized. We completed the distribution of property, and I was able to claim a settlement for Charles's harassment, which I had recorded. It was worth paying for a lawyer instead of fighting alone. Charles, concerned about his public image, avoided any complications by involving lawyers. Knowing exactly how much money Charles had from managing the household finances, I suggested an amount he could just about afford. With the property distribution and harassment settlement paid in full, I started a comfortable life in my own apartment. I used to hate being alone before marriage, but after living with the in-laws and getting divorced, I embraced the newfound freedom. I've grown to appreciate the solitude of my own time. Cooking meals for myself, I relish the tranquility without anyone raising complaints. About 3 months after the divorce, Charles persistently calls, and though I assume it's nothing positive, I choose not to answer. However, A momentary lapse results in me accidentally picking up. "What have you done to my house?" Charles's voice booms through the phone. Instinctively, I move the device away from my ear to endure the loud onslaught. I respond, "I haven't done anything. I left the house as you instructed." Charles remains unsatisfied, continuing to yell. He's upset about notifications regarding issues with withdrawals, blaming me for the problem. I calmly assert that I didn't alter anything and adhered to his instructions, managing and paying everything due. As the realization of why Charles is angry dawns on me, a grin widens on my face. I'm glad he's not here to witness it. Charles, incredulous, questions the financial aspects, asking how much I earned. I recall never revealing my salary details to him. $45,000 take home. I respond. Charles reacts with a sound akin to a squashed frog before falling silent. In truth, my job in sales at an investment trust company involved a commission-based salary, influenced by the returns generated for investors. Unfortunately, much of it vanished due to Charles' extravagant spending. However, I had wisely invested the inheritance from my parents, bringing in some income. Although not substantial, it covered living expenses. During the property distribution, only William's savings were considered since my parents' inheritance and its earnings were not part of it. Charles, insistent, questions whether the standard of living before marriage was the same. As I press on, he begins to get angrier. In the midst of his tirade, I couldn't help but laugh at his absurd demand. With Charles yelling to keep contributing money to the house, I retort, "You're the one who ruined it. Why should I, no longer a family member, give you money?" I chuckle half-heartedly, and amidst my laughter, I heard something shatter on the other end. Another one of Charles's tantrums. The realization that I no longer had to clean up after his outbursts made me almost wish he would break more. We were strangers now, no longer family or anything remotely close. I urged him not to act like family and advised him to manage his own finances, leaving him just enough to get by. With that, I bid him goodbye and ended the call. I anticipated more calls, but none came. I thought maybe he was remorseful, but it became apparent that wasn't the case. Perhaps he felt ashamed for not being able to make payments and resorted to ordering William and Madison to borrow money from financial institutions, plunging them into further debt. While payments were made, their unwillingness to change their lifestyle perpetuated the cycle of accumulating more debt each month. I learned about this when William pathetically contacted me, even expressing a desire for reconciliation. Furthermore, William proposed cutting ties with Dad and getting back together. However, such a suggestion seemed hypocritical coming from someone who never stood up for me against Charles' harassment. Despite choosing to stay with William, knowing we couldn't have children, he never protected me. Returning to him was not on my agenda. Charles might have felt suffocated, but that was no longer my concern. I wish they understood the consequences of their actions and endured the suffering now. The in-laws struggled with debt, yet they couldn't bring themselves to reduce their lifestyle standards. Charles, now a contract worker with a reduced salary, joined Madison and William in part-time security jobs. It wasn't just Charles. It was also Madison and William, persisting in maintaining their living standards despite being at their limits. I used to be desperate to protect William, but now I lived for myself. At 40, having children might be challenging, but I remained open to the possibility. Before the divorce, waking up felt like a chore, but now I woke up feeling refreshed, eagerly anticipating a better future in my new life.